Hello everyone, welcome to What If Deku Was Abandoned as Child and Got Adopted by Stain and Mirko Part 2. Before we start, please go support cismomusic for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Deku is a male. Chapter 14, Thank You. IZUKU took off his mask and bandages, looking at the condom wrapper, and just let out a laugh, saying, They were amazed by the phrase. At this he scratched his cheeks, saying, What a first impression I had with Senpai. I'll apologize to her later. Now, I'll go back to my bedroom to rest for a while, or rather, I need more information about my past, so she is the best option. The freckled man blindfolded himself again and put on his mask, beginning to walk down from the roof. After a few minutes he was reaching the entrance to the bedrooms, but at that moment a certain green-haired girl came out, and when she saw him she became very happy and quickly went towards him, and on impulse gave him a hug, saying, I finally found you, Oni-chan. I've been looking for you. I want to make up for the time we lost. I want to be able to spend more time with you. She took off his mask, lifting his bandages to give him a smile, because she wanted to see his eyes and for him to see her. IZUKU, gosh, if you start hugging me every time you see me, you'll look a lot like Mirko one-san. Izumi, don't complain, this is the first hug I've given you. Can I hug you? He asked tenderly. IZUKU just closed his eyes, saying, If you put on that look I can't say no. Izumi, really? IZUKU, no. Izumi pouted, somewhat annoyed. IZUKU just laughed a little. He put his hand on her head, saying, We can spend as much time together as you want, but first I want an answer, so let's go see him. I want to know the reason why you thought he was dead. Clearly there's something that doesn't fit in all of this. Izumi, okay, I need answers too. So let's go now since it's our day off. She gave him a warm smile as she looked into his eyes. IZUKU was a little taller than Momo, so Izumi was shorter, so she had to raise her gaze slightly to look him in the eyes. IZUKU, well, you can wait for me a moment. I'll go tell Aizawa-sensei that we'll be leaving the academy. Izumi nodded her head. 7 minutes later. We can see how IZUKU and Izumi walked side by side through the streets. Izumi looked sideways at the green-haired boy. What caught her attention was the reason why he wore those bandages on his eyes most of the time. Izumi, Oni-chan, I know it's because of your training, but is there another reason why you almost never take off your bandages? IZUKU, upon hearing those words, would say, What is the point of that question? Izumi, just curiosity, I guess. Well, I don't know. There's something in me that tells me that the bandages are for something other than your training. IZUKU, maybe there's another reason, I guess, but it's just something I don't want to remember. For that simple fact he uses my bandages, I feel that I am safer for you with the bandages on. Izumi, safer for us? What are you talking about? IZUKU, it's a long story. Izumi, I understand, I won't force you to tell me, but if one day you need to talk you can trust me, yes. He said as he gave her a warm hug as they walked. IZUKU understood, sister. After a few seconds they arrived at the green-haired girl's house. Izumi for some reason felt that she did not want to hear her father's answer. She clenched her fists without realizing it. IZUKU put his hand on her head, saying, Come on, don't be so nervous. Now I'm by your side, yes? Izumi nodded and walked to the entrance and knocked on the door. Well, the green-haired girl hadn't told her father anything about IZUKU or that they were going to the house, so Hisashi didn't know anything. The door opened, revealing a man of somewhat thin build. His hair was black, as were his eyes. When he saw his daughter and a boy at her side, he felt as if time had slowed down when he saw how that boy took off his mask and bandages, which little by little fell from his eyes, revealing their emerald color and freckles. Hisashi just opened his eyes in surprise when he saw that boy, who was undoubtedly the weight of guilt that he had carried since that day when he had abandoned him in that alley. He could only say, IZUKU, it's you. Maybe I'm seeing wrong. Izumi, of course not, Dad. She touched her brother, saying, It's IZUKU, the IZUKU you told me had died along with Mom. Because? Why did you lie to me, Dad? He asked with his eyes glazed over. Tears began to fall from Hisashi's cheeks as he knelt down, saying, Forgive me, I really never wanted to do that. Izumi, do what Daddy. What did you do? Izuku put his bandages and mask back on and knelt down to Hisashi to tell him. I want to know the reason why you told Izumi that I was dead. I want to know the reason why I ended up growing up without my real family. And you are the only one who can give me the answers to my questions. Hisashi wiped away his tears and with a broken voice said, Come in, I'll tell you everything. Although I no longer expect to be forgiven for my mistakes. Izumi looked at Izuku. The green-haired boy grabbed her hand, squeezing it tenderly to tell her, Come on, let's go. They both entered the house, which was a 2-story house, and sat on the sofa in the main room. Hisashi sat in front of them receiving his daughter's full gaze. On the other hand, Izuku only had his gaze down. Izumi, well, Dad? Hisashi took a breath of air and said, 15 years ago his mother was giving birth to 2 little twins that we had been waiting for 9 months. That day was supposed to be the happiest of our lives, but fate had other plans for her mother. Seconds after you were born, she passed away, leaving you unable to hold them in your arms, unable to feel their little hands. As he spoke, his voice began to break more and more. When the doctor came out to give me the news, I felt like my happiness had completely left me. She always told me that everything was going to be okay, that the 4 of us would be happy, but losing her mother affected me more than I thought. I couldn't bear all that pain. When her mother's funeral came around, I didn't know what to do. I was in debt, the job I had didn't help me much. To be honest, I didn't know how I was going to support you. I didn't have enough money to give you the life you deserved. So the day that you were discharged so that I could take you out of the hospital, that day Izumi already had tears falling down her cheeks as she got an idea of what he might say, so she asked, That day, Dad? What did you do, Dad? Izuku, that day you made the decision to abandon one of us too. Am I wrong? Hisashi, not at all. That day was the day when I, Hisashi Midoriya, did something unforgivable. When I went to pick them up at the hospital, I had made the decision to sell the house and go abroad to look for a better job. But the money I had at the time was not enough to support them both. So I headed to an alley, and that's where I left you, Izuku. Izumi's eyes opened wide, feeling great pain and at the same time great anger for what she was hearing, so she asked, Why did you abandon him in the alley as if he were an object? Did you want him to die of hunger or cold? What were you thinking, Dad? Couldn't you at least walk to an orphanage and give him up for adoption? Hisashi, at that moment I wasn't thinking clearly, daughter. I don't even deserve to be considered a father after the inhuman act I did by abandoning my own son to his own fate. Believe me when I tell you that not a single damn day has gone by that I haven't condemned myself for doing that. Do you know how many times I've gone to your mother's grave to ask her to forgive me for my mistakes? If I could go back in time and fix everything, I swear I would, daughter, he said while crying from the guilt he felt. Izumi, I don't understand why you lied to me all this time. Hisashi, what did you want me to tell you? If I had told you the truth, you would have hated me. I couldn't even look you in the eyes now, daughter. Izumi, I could never hate you, much less now. All I can feel now is disappointment because of you. Izuku just stood there silently, not saying a single word. Hisashi, I didn't expect you and Izuku to meet again. I knew someone was going to find him in that alley, but I never thought you would meet again some time later. I am really sorry, son. I understand that you despise me and hate me for what I did, but... Izuku, thank you. Hisashi, huh? Izuku stood up saying, I just thank you. At least you did what you could to raise Izumi, and for that I thank you. Also, if you hadn't done that, maybe I would have never met my real family, which are Mirko and Shia-san. You said it right. Destiny had different plans for everyone, and mine was to reach their lives, and it was the best destiny I could have, even though I couldn't be or grow up with Izumi. Hisashi, forgive me as son. Izuku, the person you have to apologize to is Izumi, not me. She was the one you lied to, not me. Besides, she is your daughter and I am Izuku Yasujiyama. I was raised with the unconditional love and affection of my sisters, so I never had a father. So please, sir, don't call me son. Right now I wouldn't even be able to look you in the eye. I already got the answers I wanted, so I have nothing more to do here. He turned around to leave when Izumi stopped him, saying, Oni-chan, wait for me. I'll go with you. Right now I want to be with you. I think I've lived enough in a lie, she said as she looked at her father with eyes full of sadness and disappointment, while wiping away her tears. They both left the house, walking away little by little. Hisashi was just kneeling crying while saying, Forgive me, Izumi. Forgive me, Izuku. Izumi walked in complete silence with her eyes crystallized, knowing the truth of everything. She felt warm arms surround her in a tender hug. The freckled boy whispered in her ear, Hey, don't cry. The important thing is that we are together now. Izumi turned around, hiding her head in her chest, and through tears she would say, Why did everything have to happen like this? I'm sorry for everything, Oni-chan. Izuku, it's not your fault. The green-haired girl was crying on the freckled boy's chest, who under his mask had a slight smile, while he said to her, I won't let you go until you calm down. Izumi, I don't want you to let me go either. Izuku took off his mask and lowered the blindfold to lift Izumi's chin just to look into her eyes, wipe her tears and say, From now on I will never leave you, and also, family comes first. Right, Toretto? He asked while looking at how a few meters away from them there was a black car and the driver was Dominic Toretto, who upon hearing the freckled man's words gave his typical saying. Exact. Family first, Izuku. He left in his car while music played in the background. Letter. Even if they say I'm a bandit wherever I go, I thank God for being where I am today. And I'm going to continue with my grave. And with my red eyes. With my cats active. You've given me everything. Both brothers watched the car drive away. They were standing in front of a park where there were some children playing, and at the same time they looked at the couple. Chapter 15. But I'm just your idiot. After a few seconds, Izuku stopped hugging her to say, Do you want to go out for a drink? I know a very good coffee shop downtown. Izumi showed him a smile, saying, Yes, I do want to. Izuku, let's go then. They both began to walk slowly, but this time Izuku was without his bandages and with his mask in his hand. Izumi, why did you take off your mask and bandages? Izuku, maybe it'll do me good to walk around without them on from time to time. You don't believe it? He asked as he looked at her and showed her a slight, sincere but warm smile, which for that moment had made her forget everything that had happened until a few minutes ago. The green-haired girl only returned that smile, saying, If you're right too. Without his Oni-chan mask he looks cuter. Izuku just looked at her and let out a small laugh, saying, You're just like her. Izumi, her? Who are you talking about? Izuku, nobody's business, let's just keep going, he said with a slight smile. After about 8 minutes they arrived at the place that Izuku had mentioned to the green-haired girl. They both sat near the window facing each other. After a few seconds a girl of more or less the same age as them approached the table to take their order, but when she arrived she stared at Izuku for a few seconds. Izuku noticed this, so he asked, Miss, is something wrong? The girl reacted to that question saying, I'm so sorry, it's just that when I saw you I had the feeling that I had seen you before. Izuku, huh? Really? The girl had light brown eyes. Her hair was a shade of blue which reached a little below her waist. To the side of her left eye she had a small mole that gave her a very adorable and tender touch. Sure, please tell me what you're going to order, he replied with some nervousness. Izuku, I'll order a chocolate cappuccino with 2 of their famous chocolate sweet buns. And you, Izumi, what are you going to order? Izumi, well, I'll order the same as him. The girl looked at the green-haired girl and smiled kindly, saying, Understood. I'll bring you your orders in a few minutes. Izuku, thank you. That girl walked away from the table. Izuku looked at the green-haired girl asking, Do you also like chocolate cappuccino? Izumi, well, I've never tried it, but there's always a first time, isn't there? IZUKU, of course. While they were waiting for their orders, the green-haired girl talked to them about various things. They laughed at the things they were talking about. Izumi now had a beautiful smile on her face, her eyes shining brighter than before, seeming to be full of life and happiness. That girl who had taken their orders was walking towards them, with said orders. She carefully placed things on the table, saying, "Here are your orders, enjoy it," he said with a big smile. IZUKU, thank you very much. That girl looked sideways at IZUKU while Izumi took a sip, testing her order. She looked at Izumi and said nervously, "Excuse me for telling you this, but..." That girl approached the green-haired girl's ear and whispered, "This is the first time I've seen such a cute couple. Your boyfriend is definitely very handsome, young lady, you are so lucky to have him." Izumi blushed deeply upon hearing that and choked on her cappuccino, beginning to cough with her face very red. IZUKU stood up while gently patting his back, saying, "Are you okay?" Izumi, "Why yes, I'm fine." That girl just looked at the scene with a slight smile, saying in her thoughts, "He even cares about her, what a sweet couple." The waitress walked away from the table. The freckled boy returned to his place watching as Izumi looked at her cup still embarrassed, and in her thoughts she would say, why did she think something else like that? That Oni-chan and IRP couples p at all. Steam was coming out of Izumi's ears as she thought about that girl's words. IZUKU would just take his order, and in his chibi version he would say, my. He had a small pink tint of satisfaction on his cheeks as he tried the cappuccino he loved so much. Izumi, trying to calm her thoughts, looked out the window and saw a certain bicolor girl walking past on the other side of the street. Shota was walking with headphones on, and instinctively looked to his left side, seeing that cafeteria on the other side of the street, more specifically how in that window there was a certain green-haired girl who was waving at him with her hand exaggeratedly. "Shota, Midoriya-san." The bicolor with a slight smile returned the greeting. IZUKU and Shota exchanged glances for a second. The freckled boy raised his hand to greet her. Shota saw how he was greeting her, and with his neutral gaze he ignored him. Izumi saw this, saying, "Oni-chan, she just ignored you." IZUKU, with a drop of sweat on his head, replied, "Really? I hadn't realized. Thanks for letting me know," he replied sarcastically. The green-haired girl left the cafeteria and seconds later she entered with the bicolored girl sitting in front of IZUKU. "IZUKU, how are you?" Shota looked at Izumi, saying, "Why did you bring me Midoriya-san?" Izumi, "Good, so the three of us can get to know each other better. Now the three of us are partners, and since you were passing by I wanted you to have a drink with us." IZUKU, "Come on, cold girl, you can order whatever you want, I'll treat you." Shota continued to ignore him, and he would say, "I appreciate the offer, Midoriya-san, but I'm a little busy right now. I was going home to see my mother. I agreed to help her with something. Now that I have a day off, maybe another time we can have a drink." Izumi, I see, I understand. Sorry to bother you." Shota, "It's okay." IZUKU took a sip of his cappuccino, saying, "It's already cold. Hey cold girl, could you warm it up for me?" Shota gave a slight smile, saying, "All right." She gave the cup a light touch, freezing it completely, saying, "Ready." IZUKU, "Just as I wanted, thank you very much." Izumi looked at this with a drop of sweat, saying to herself, "The two of them, I think they don't get along." Shota stood up, said goodbye to Izumi, and left. IZUKU would just say in a low voice. Her tone of voice this time was the same one she used when I first spoke to her. After a while IZUKU paid the bill and together with the green-haired girl they left the place. It was half an hour until noon. "IZUKU, do you want to go for a walk around there for a while?" Izumi nodded tenderly and they began walking, passing by several fun places. It was already 12:35. IZUKU asked, "Do you want to go to a place that is special to me?" Izumi, Go to the place that is special for Oniai-chan. I would love to, she replied with a big smile. Izuku, then let's go. He took her by the hand and began to run lightly. Izumi blushed at that action because the waitress's words were still in her head. And even more so now that he had taken her by the hand. Izumi could now only wonder if they really looked like a couple. After a few minutes they arrived at a 5-story building. Izumi, this place is. Izuku smiled at him saying. It is Mirko One-san's agency. Izuku had not let go of her hand at any time. She pulled her inside the building and then a voice would say, Welcome to the Hero Mir Agencies. That voice stopped when he saw before his eyes a green-haired boy with emerald eyes. Izuku smiled warmly saying, Hello Shia One-san. Shia just walked up to him and gave him a warm hug. This hug was with unconditional love. Izuku reciprocated that hug. Shia, it's only been a few days since you left, but still. It makes me happy to see you again. She separated from Izuku, seeing Izumi and how they were identical. Izuku, sister, this is Aizu. Shia approached her and with a smile said, Nice to meet you, Izumi Midoriya. I am Shia Yusujiyama. Mirko has already told me everything that happened. Please make yourself at home now. She hugged her just like Izuku, saying, I have another little sister to take care of, and you're just as adorable as Izuku. Izumi felt that affection that seemed like that of a mother. Yes, she had to admit that feeling was warm and unique. Izumi, thank you Shia-san. Shia, don't be so formal, just call me sister like Izuku does. He said as he showed her a kind smile. Izumi nodded her head. Shia took her hand saying, Tell me, would you like to see the photo album from when Izuku was little? Izumi, I'd like to see Oniai-chan as a child. Izuku, hey sister, it's not necessary. He couldn't finish speaking as Shia took Izumi to the third of the agency. Izuku with a drop of sweat would say, I see that as always you let yourself be carried away by your emotions. He was about to follow them when he felt arms wrap around his back in a tender hug, while a delicate chin rested on his left shoulder and a warm, sweet voice spoke into his ear saying, I also want you to hug me like you hugged her. Izuku, but Mirko One-san is the one who hugs me most of the time. After saying that, he carried her under his thighs, carrying the rabbit on his back, making her blush in surprise. Mirko, Izuku. Izuku, Mirko One-san must be tired, so I'll carry you to the third floor with the others. Mirko just rested his chin on the boy's green hair saying, Thanks, although it's a bit embarrassing. Izuku started to climb the stairs with Mirko on his back. Mirko just looked at him as she snuggled closer to his body and quietly said, You. Without realizing it, you changed my life. When they reached the third floor, they saw that there was no one there, so the freckled man went up with Mirko to the fourth floor, where they found the two girls sitting on the sofa in the living room looking at the photo album. Izuku carefully lowered Mirko. She smiled tenderly at him, looking into his eyes saying, I'm glad you took off the bandages. What happened that day wasn't your fault. I don't want you to keep blaming yourself. Izuku, I'm really sorry, Mir. Mirko put his hand on her cheek saying, That's already part of the past, yes? Izuku nodded his head saying, Go take a bath, that will relax you a little. Mirko, you know I don't like being given orders. Izuku, but it's me, so you'll listen to me, he said as he stroked her head tenderly. Mirko puffed out his cheeks saying, HMP, just because it's you I will accept that order. The rabbit went to take a shower with a tender smile. Izuku went to the kitchen saying, I'll make lunch since Shia One-san will be busy with Izumi. He took some ingredients out of the fridge and started chopping some vegetables and getting to cooking. Shia and Izumi heard noises in the kitchen and went to see. When they arrived, they saw the freckled boy cooking. Shia looked at Izumi saying, Do you want us to give him a hand? Izumi nodded her head and they approached Izuku, starting to help him cook, the three of them together creating a warm and familiar atmosphere. After getting out of the shower, the rabbit also joined in to help them. The four of them laughed while they talked and had fun cooking. We can see how the four were sitting and in unison they would say, Itadakimasu. They began to eat happily, sharing that happy family moment. Everyone had a laugh on their faces. Izuku saw how the three girls smiled, so he gave a slight smile, saying, "I wish this moment of happiness would never end." After finishing lunch, Shia picked up the dishes. Izuku took care of washing and rinsing them, while Izumi dried them and Mirko put them away. After that, Izuku and Izumi said goodbye to them because they had to return to the academy. Shia hugged them both, saying, "When you have free days, come visit me, yes?" Both young people attended. Mirko, well, I'll wait for you this Saturday to train. Oh, by the way, girl. Izumi, yes. Mirko, you are now part of our family, so feel free to come see us whenever you want. Mirko gave him a slight smile. Izumi, thank you. The young men left the agency, leaving Shia and Mirko both just watching as they slowly walked away. Shia, who would have thought that the family would grow? Both girls entered the agency. Izuku and Izumi were walking in a pleasant and warm silence. They saw how about 20 meters away from them was a certain bicolor standing, and in front of her was a boy with gray hair and emerald eyes. He was a little taller than her. Shota, having him in front of him, clenched his fist helplessly. The boy had a sad look and would say, "Please at least listen to me, Shota." "I really do." "Shota, I don't want to listen to you." The bicolor had a look full of hate, and a few tears threatened to come out of her eyes. She clenched her fists quite helplessly. The boy tried to grab his hand, but before he could, the boy had scooped Shota into his arms. Shota was surprised by that action and looked up at a certain freckled man with green eyes. "Izuku, I'm really sorry, but I'll take her with me." The freckled man walked past with the bicolor in his arms, saying, "Let's go, Izumi." Izumi, yes. The green-haired girl followed her brother, complaining little by little about that boy. Shota just looked into Izuku's eyes. She looked away, saying, "Why did you carry me? I don't remember asking you for help, Usajiyama." "Izuku, I know, it just bothered me that another boy bothered my cool girl. Only I can make you angry," she responded with a warm smile. Shota just opened his eyes slightly, saying, "I idiot." "Izuku, but I'm just your idiot." Chapter 16. I would paint you in it. That simple sentence had made the bicolor blush slightly, which she tried to hide. What Izumi noticed was that her partner had never asked her to put her down, since Izuku continued walking carrying her in his arms. The people who were watching them saw how the freckled man carried her as if she were a princess. They were walking almost about to turn a corner of the street, but unfortunately, Hawks and Endeavor came out of that corner and ran into the boys head-on. Shota saw her father, who was looking at her in the freckled boy's arms. Hawks looked closely at the scene, looking at Endeavor and then at Izuku. He gave a slight smile and approached Izuku and punched him on the back, saying, "Izuku, my boy, good to see you again. Hey, aren't you going to say hello to your girlfriend's father?" he said, pointing at Endeavor. Shota quickly got out of the green-haired boy's arms, quite embarrassed and trying to remain calm. Endeavor, Shota. "Are you and this guy dating?" Shota, not at all, he replied with a neutral and somewhat cold expression. Endeavor looked into her eyes for a few seconds and asked again, "Then why was he carrying you in his arms? I don't see that you're hurt or anything." Shota, oh well. "Izuku, what happened is that a few minutes ago she stepped wrong and twisted her ankle, and I offered to carry her until she felt better, that's all." Endeavor, I see. Thank you so much for helping my daughter. Izuku, you're welcome. Izumi in her thoughts would say, "Wow, I can't believe I believed him." Hawks in his thoughts would say, "It's clearly a lie." He noticed that Izuku was without his bandages, so he asked, "Izuku, are you okay without wearing your blindfolds?" Izuku, oh yeah, at least nothing bad happened. So don't worry, Hawks. Hawks understood. Endeavor, your hair, boy, wasn't it a shade of gray? Izuku, ah well, sometimes I painted that color out of admiration for my sister Mirko. Endeavor, Mirko? Are you Mirko's brother? No, you don't have similarities in terms of their ears and that. So I gather they are not blood brothers. IZUKU, exactly, let's say I'm his adopted brother. Endeavor, I see, by the way. I heard that UA is resuming its internships. So I'll be waiting for you at my agency, boy. These words surprised Izumi and Shota. Shota, are you interested in Yusujiyama? Endeavor, I'm pretty sure he's a. IZUKU, okay, I'll go, but only if she goes. He said, pointing at Shota. Shota, hey me? Endeavor, don't worry, she'll come too. Why do you want her to come? IZUKU, because if she doesn't go I'll get bored, and I won't have anyone to bother. He said as he looked at Shota with a slight smile. Shota, rot baka, he replied with his cold voice. IZUKU, well, it was a pleasure meeting you, Endeavor-san, let's go. Izumi. Shota, are you coming with us or will you stay a little longer with your father? Shota, I'll stay a little longer. IZUKU, I understand, then see you Hawks and Endeavor-san. Hawks, bye guys. Endeavor just watched the freckled man walk away while glancing at his daughter from the corner of his eye. As they were walking, Izumi looked sideways at the green-haired man who had a slight smile, saying, Any Oniai-chan. Do you like Todoroki-san? IZUKU, Let's see. He gave her a slight smile and said, I will leave my answer in ellipsis. Izumi, that's not fair. I wanted to know your answer, she said while making a cute pout. IZUKU just laughed lightly. He put his hand on her hair, saying, He's not a bad father, so don't hate him. Izumi just opened her eyes wide. IZUKU, you've been trying to act like always, but I could see through your emotions that you're affected by what he told you. But he was the one who suffered the most. Losing his wife devastated him, and he fell into despair at the thought that he would not be able to care for his own children. It must have been very hard for him to have to choose which of the two to leave, but now I want you to remember every moment you lived with him, and I want you to tell me if he was a bad father. Those words brought back countless moments of being happy with her father. Several tears began to flow from her cheeks. IZUKU hugged her, saying, You don't really want to hate him. When one is angry, one simply says words that can emotionally hurt the people we love. And you want it. If you had been in his place, what would you have done? Izumi, I'm sorry. IZUKU, without letting go of her, would say, When you see him again, ask for forgiveness and fix things. After all, you are his only family now. Izumi nodded her head as she clung to the freckled boy's crying body. Since that day, IZUKU had spent a little more time with Izumi. At lunchtime, Momo and Mina would join him. Izumi always took Shota to have lunch with them. Every time their eyes met, he would smile kindly at her. But she would look away because she still remembered when he had carried her in his arms and how her father had thought they were a couple. Finally, Saturday had arrived. We can see how IZUKU was standing outside the UA waiting for a certain bicolor. The green-haired man looked at the cloudy sky full of very gray clouds. Then a voice behind him took him out of his concentration. I'm ready now, Baka. IZUKU turned around to find a bicolor girl with her hair down. She was wearing a long-sleeved black shirt with a heart on her chest. The shirt reached a little below her buttocks since it was a larger size, but still gave her a cute touch. She had dark blue pants. The freckled man stared at her for a few seconds, as it was inevitable not to look at her. Honestly, she was very beautiful, and even more so when she had a lock of hair hanging down that almost covered her left eye. Shota saw this, and inside she became a little embarrassed, but on the outside she struggled to keep her expression neutral, which would say, You're staring at me too much if you know that's harassment, right? IZUKU, so it's a crime to look at someone you like? At that question, Shota had a slight pink tint on his cheeks and would say, Shut up, don't say those things as if it were nothing. I don't believe you either. We better go for a walk before I regret it. IZUKU understood my cold girl. He let out a little laugh to start his walk. The freckled man was wearing a thin jacket that was black on his torso and changed to a red tone on the sleeves. Underneath his jacket he was wearing a black tank top. Despite being a thin jacket, it clung to his toned body, highlighting his muscles. They both walked in silence without saying a single word. Shota looked at him sideways, saying, I'm sorry I froze your cup in the cafeteria that day. IZUKU, oh, it's okay, don't worry, that's already in the past. Shota, thanks too for keeping me away from him. IZUKU, from now on I will leave my hair green so as not to remind you of him. After all, we do have a resemblance. Now I understand better why you treated me like that the first time. Shota didn't say anything for a few seconds and then said, I couldn't hate you. IZUKU looked at her saying, Really? Why? Shota looked at him and gave him a slight smile saying, Because I already hate you, and I don't think I can hate you anymore. IZUKU would just have a drop of sweat on his head saying, I thought you would tell me why it was special to you. Shota, not at all, you are very annoying and bothersome. So I would never say something like that to you, he replied in a neutral voice. IZUKU, you'll end up breaking my fragile heart. Shota, if you want, I can turn it to ashes, he said while creating a flame of fire in his palm. IZUKU, I meant it literally. He saw how the bicolor for the first time let out a small laugh. IZUKU's eyes at that moment saw how beautiful she looked when she smiled. He also began to laugh along with her. The young people were almost reaching a beach where there were a few steps to descend to the beach. The couple sat looking at the sea water. IZUKU, we'd have a better view if it wasn't cloudy. Shota, I don't care. IZUKU, I understand. Do you want to tell me what happened between you and him? You can try to act like always, but since that day I've noticed you're quite distracted. As if you were lost in your thoughts all the time. Shota brought his knees closer to his chest and rested his chin on hers saying, It's a long story that I don't want to tell. IZUKU, well, I have all the time in the world, but I can't force you to tell me if you don't want to. After all, everyone has their own painful memories. For the first time, Shota could see that there was a tone of sadness in his eyes. This would say, If I tell you, will you tell me your story? I know you have one too. IZUKU, fair enough. Shota just gave a slight sigh saying, When I started high school I had a classmate who, out of all my classmates, came up to me and spoke to me one day. You see, I didn't have any friends because everyone was afraid of my father, since every time I went out he was waiting for me to take me to train, all because of his obsession with surpassing All Might. It was like that for as long as I can remember. I grew up estranged from my siblings and unable to make friends, and when he came up to me and talked to me that day I felt very happy. His name is Haru Kurosawa. We are both the same age. Since he spoke to me for the first time he seemed like a kind and gentle boy. From that day we began our friendship and a year went by in which I only spent my time talking to him. I liked that feeling that only he gave me when he looked at me and smiled. He made me feel that I was special to him. The days passed and without realizing it I had fallen in love with him. Already in my second year of high school I worked up the courage to give him chocolates on Valentine's Day. In my senior year of high school I decided to finally tell him my feelings, and so I did. I was really happy when he reciprocated my feelings. Maybe what I'm going to tell you sounds cheesy, but I really wanted to be with him. After all, he was my first love. There were times when I secretly snuck out of the house to go on dates with him. Each date was unique to me. When he kissed me for the first time I was really happy with my first kiss. I knew better than anyone that our relationship couldn't be kept a secret for long, so I spoke to Dad to introduce him. And he reluctantly agreed as he told me it would just distract me from my training and stuff like that. When I told him he seemed a little nervous and told me that after classes we could go to my house. His answer made me happy because if Dad accepted it we wouldn't have to hide what was between us. That day we had sports class and the boys left later than us. I was waiting for him outside and when I saw that he hadn't arrived I went to look for him in the classroom. And before arriving I could hear the voice of his friends in his. Apparently they were having a conversation. Because of the rush I hurried and before opening the living room door I heard something I shouldn't have heard. IZUKU could see Shota clench his fists, and tears begin to fall from his cheeks as his voice broke. Shota, all the time he was paying for a bet he lost with his friends. The loser's only payment was to approach and talk to the weird girl in the classroom. the girl with the burn on her eye, until she finished high school. All this time he was just pretending to be having fun and having a good time with me. I heard him tell his friends that he couldn't pretend anymore, that he had gone too far by agreeing to go out with a girl who wasn't pretty. Because of this damn spot over my eye. IZUKU just clenched his fist, knowing what she had been through. Shota, I really loved him. Do you have any idea how I felt when I heard all that? He took my heart and happiness in less than a second. The bicolor passed her 2 hands over her face, wiping away her tears as she cried. I'm not pretty, I wasn't perfect for him. Since that day I had lost my desire to smile, and that's when I decided. IZUKU, hiding behind that cold personality, I don't blame you for doing it. Shota had finally let off steam after so much. IZUKU wrapped her in a warm hug, saying, I'll be here until you calm down. Shota just hid her face in his chest, crying as those painful memories came back to her. IZUKU just hugged her gently, saying, You don't have to carry that past alone. I know we just met recently, but if you leave me, then I want to take your pain only for myself, so that you don't suffer. He gently caressed her hair. The freckled man separated her from him, placing his right hand on her cheek, stopping her, looking into her crystallized eyes and hers. IZUKU gave him a smile, saying, You know everything that is perfect is tedious. You weren't perfect for him, you say? So it's okay like that. I prefer 1,000 times to see how my cold girl shines with her defects than to see her be perfect. Well, for me, defects are something that characterize and make a person special. There is no happiness in what is perfect, for the simple fact that it would shine alone in its perfect world, feeling envy of its own defect, since there is always a person who fits each of our defects. Shota opened his eyes slightly at those words. IZUKU moved the strand of hair that covered her left eye and gave her a slight smile, saying, Do you know why several painters criticized Pablo Picasso's works? Shota shook his head slightly. IZUKU hugged her, saying, Because not everyone knows how to appreciate beautiful things. Their eyes saw what they wanted to see, for that reason they never saw the truly beautiful things in life. Picasso painted what he liked and considered beautiful, despite what others thought of him. And if I had a canvas right now, I would paint you in the... Because in my eyes you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. You would be the painting I would look at every day of my life until my eyes close and never open again. Readers knowing Shota's past. Grabbing the Mjolnir from Endgame, saying, Bring me Haru. XD. Chapter 17. How warm is this? Shota, hearing those words, gave a slight smile, and while he dried his tears he would say, Thanks, I know you're saying this to encourage me. IZUKU, I mean it. Shota, even being hugged by him, had a slight pink tint, but she only closed her eyes, saying, I don't know whether to believe you or not, but I think I hate you less now. IZUKU, whether you hate me or not, that doesn't matter to me, I just want you to stop crying. Shota, I'm sorry for showing you my most pathetic side. IZUKU, I like it. I like you better the way you are now, although I also like your cold side, but if I had to choose, I would choose the you of now. Shota just rested his head on his chest, saying, Enough, you're embarrassing me, idiot, he said while letting out a light laugh. IZUKU, well, I guess I have to tell my story now. He gave a slight sigh and said, When my quirk is... He felt a few drops of water touch his face. The freckled boy looked up, seeing how it was starting to drizzle. IZUKU stood up next to Shota, taking her hand. They started running to find a place to take cover from the drizzle. After 5 minutes we could see them under the roof of a small bus stop. The drizzle had become a little stronger, and they were both breathing heavily. IZUKU, we arrived before he got louder. Shota saw it, and just started laughing, saying, It was fun. IZUKU, you're right. A small breeze of cold air blew over both of them. IZUKU took off his jacket and placed it on Shota, who was only surprised by said action. Shota, what are you doing? IZUKU, what else could I do? Protect yourself from the cold, of course. The air is fresh, I don't want you to get sick. IZUKU zipped up his jacket all the way, and when he looked up he met the bicolor's eyes staring at him. "Izuku, what's wrong?" "Shota, nothing, it's just that. I guess you're not as much of an idiot as I thought." "Izuku, I don't know whether to feel flattered or insulted," he replied with a light laugh. "Shota, don't tell anyone what I told you." "Izuku, hey, you don't have to worry, this will be our secret." He showed her a warm smile that calmed all of the bicolor's emotions for that moment. They both sat down. Shota looked at him saying, "So when your quirk manifested, what happened? You didn't finish telling me your story." "Izuku, oh, that's right. You see, my quirk manifested, and it was very problematic for both me and my sisters. Well, every time I sneezed or got nervous, my quirk activated and I immediately changed places with people. It was difficult to master it because I was sensitive when using it, but when I turned 6 my quirk got out of control, activating itself, and..." Several tears began to fall from Izuku's cheeks. Shota saw this, and just like he did with her, he placed his hand on her cheek, stopping the flow of her tears, making Izuku look into her eyes. Shota, with a worried look and a sad tone, would say, "And what happened?" "Izuku, I ended up hurting Mirko one-san. It's my damn fault that she wears gloves on her hands. I begged him to get away from me when I was out of control, but as still she approached me and grabbed my hands, hurting herself even more. While she had a kind look on her face, she told me that she would never be able to leave me alone. Even if I could, he told me that for nothing in the world would he lose what he loved most. He kept showing me his smile, that smile he always showed me, that smile that calmed my being in seconds. And there hasn't been a single damn day that I haven't blamed myself for hurting her. I don't want to. I don't want to hurt the people I love. That's why from that day on I blindfolded myself so I wouldn't lose control and so I couldn't hurt her again. Neither her nor Shia one-san, I couldn't forgive myself." The freckled man's voice began to crack. Shota put his hand on her hair, saying, "I guess we were both carrying painful memories." Izuku wiped away his tears, saying, "Sometimes I'm afraid I'll lose control again and end up hurting people again. And even more now that I met Izumi, Mina, Momo, and you, the fear in me grows." Shota gave him a slight smile, saying, "If you get out of control, then I'll be there to stop you." Izuku looked into her eyes, saying, "Thank you?" Shota gave him a smile, saying, "If you lose control, I can hit you with reason and at the same time get my revenge for bothering me so much by calling me cold." Izuku had a drop of sweat on his head and would say, "I don't know if you want to help me or just hit me." "Shota, maybe it's both." She let out a small laugh. Izuku just watched her laugh, and for that second, time seemed to have stopped around that bicolor girl who looked more than beautiful when she laughed. Yes, she looked more beautiful without that neutral expression. Izuku brought his hand to her left cheek. The bicolor could feel the warm touch of his fingers on her skin. The freckled boy moved his lock of hair with his fingers, placing it behind his left ear, leaving his left eye more exposed. "Shota, you Yusujiyama?" Izuku smiled slightly at him, saying, "You look more beautiful without that lock of hair covering your eye. At least when it's you and me, I want to see you without that lock of hair covering your eye. That way I'll be able to see better those eyes that attract me so much." Shota looked to his side, saying, "I told you to stop saying things like that, baka." Izuku was laughing a little while the bicolor had a slight tint on her cheeks. They looked ahead, seeing how the rain continued, and it seemed like it was not going to stop for a while, leaving the couple with no other option but to wait in that place. In Mirko's agency on the top floor, we can see how Shia was arranging some boxes in which there were some of the green-haired man's belongings that she had not sent to him. She saw how one of the boxes was open and a small All Might plush toy was sticking out of it. The brown-haired girl took it in her hands with a nostalgic look, since with that stuffed animal Izuku had arrived that day with the rabbit, that day when she entered their lives. Shia, how many memories! She noticed something coming out of the back of the stuffed animal. She turned it over and saw that there was a small hole on the back of the stuffed animal, from which the tip of what appeared to be a piece of paper was sticking out. Shia took that and began to take it out of the stuffed animal. Her eyes opened wide when she saw that it was half of a photo. A photo in which IZUKU could be seen as just a baby in the arms of a brunette next to a lit fireplace. That girl had a look full of happiness, and a smile as she held IZUKU in her arms. Shia remembered what Mirko had told him that time, and the girl in the photo was just as the rabbit had told him. Shia, she must be. Shia's eyes showed a shade of sadness as she imagined what IZUKU had to go through as a baby until he finally reached Mirko's arms. In the bedrooms of Class 1A, more exactly in the living room, we can see how a certain green-haired girl was asking a certain pink-haired girl if she had seen the freckled boy. Mina, Now that I remember, this morning I saw him leave, but I don't know where he went, I'm sorry. Izumi, I see, thanks anyway. The green-haired girl looked out the living room window, watching as the rain didn't stop. Returning to our couple, they were still sitting watching the rain in a warm and pleasant silence for both of them. IZUKU was wearing his black tank top, showing off his arms and toned torso. Shota could feel how he was getting cooler. She glanced at the freckled boy, seeing how he had a slight smile on his face. She lowered her gaze, seeing the jacket he had put on her. The freckled boy's scent came out of it. Shota, Yusujiyama, come a little closer to me, he said in a low voice. IZUKU, huh? What for? Shota, just do it. IZUKU did as requested and sat down next to her, making their bodies touch. Shota took off his jacket and placed it over both of their torsos. IZUKU glanced at her. Shota, I'll feel bad if you get sick because of me, this way we'll be fine, she said without looking at his face. IZUKU gave a slight smile and letting himself be carried away by the moment, he let his head fall on her right shoulder, making the bicolor's heart skip a beat at that moment. Shota, baka, don't take advantage of the moment. IZUKU, I'm sorry, it's just that. You are warm. Shota had a slight pink tint on his cheeks. IZUKU, I think I'll get some sleep. Can you wake me up when the rain stops? Shota, if you fall asleep and the rain stops, I'll leave and leave you here. IZUKU, I see you're still mean to me. Shota, it's because I hate you. IZUKU, I love you too. He closed his eyes without knowing that the bicolor's face was completely blushing. In a low voice he would say, Gosh, I told you to stop saying things like that, baka. She could clearly hear the freckled man's breathing so close to her. Shota, baka, are you really going to sleep? The seconds passed without a response from the freckled. Shota just closed his eyes, saying, I'll let it pass this time. She looked at him sleeping out of the corner of her eye and, somewhat embarrassed, rested her head on the freckled man's, beginning to close her eyes slowly to say, How warm this is! IZUKU just gave a slight smile, complaining as they both fell asleep in that place while the rain continued. The scene was certainly tender because if someone saw them they would think they were a couple, but they were just two people who carried painful memories until that day, since both of them let out their feelings to each other. Chapter 18. I want to walk by your side again. An hour had passed and the rain had already stopped. The bicolor slowly began to open her eyes, as she had fallen asleep next to the freckled one. She saw how it had stopped raining and at the same time she felt something warm in her right hand. She lifted the jacket, seeing how her hand and IZUKU's were intertwined in a tender hold as if they were a couple. The bicolor's cheeks turned pink in a second. Her pulse had accelerated a little. She said, somewhat embarrassed, wake up or I'll leave you here. Shota could feel IZUKU tighten his grip on her hands, causing her blush to increase further. She was already very nervous and activated her eyes side and froze IZUKU's hand, saying, Wake up, baka. IZUKU stood up suddenly when he felt the cold in his hand. He would say, What's wrong with you? Why did you freeze my hand? Shota, why you earned it, baka? I told you to wake up or I would leave you here. IZUKU just moved his frozen hand, saying, It's the first time I've been woken up like this. Shota just looked to the side and in his thoughts he would say, I won't tell you the real reason why I did it. IZUKU, if it's not too much to ask, could you defrost it? Shota, I guess I can do it. Shota, I guess I can do it. She approached him and took his hand, beginning to unfreeze it. After a few seconds, the freckled man already had his hand normal, and he would say, "Thank you and please don't do it again," he said with a somewhat awkward laugh. "Shota, just don't do something like that again and I won't." "Izuku, do what?" "Shota, you know baka. Let's go back to the academy now that it stopped raining." The freckled boy nodded his head and took the jacket, grabbing Shota and putting the jacket back on him. "Shota, I can do it alone," she replied, somewhat embarrassed. "Izuku, I know, but I wanted to do it for you." The boys resumed their journey towards the academy. The sky was still cloudy, and small breezes of fresh air blew from time to time. Izuku stretched out his arms, saying, "I slept well, although it was a rather short nap." Shota didn't say anything because in his right hand he still felt that warm sensation that the freckled boy's hand caused him. He had a small blush on his cheeks while he felt a warm and beautiful emotion all over his body. She said in a low voice, "You really are a baka." "Izuku, huh? Did you say something, cold girl?" "Shota, no, and stop calling me that," he responded with his neutral gaze. "Izuku, it's okay, cold girl." "Shota, are you stupid or are you pretending?" Izuku just laughed lightly at that bicolor's question. She just sighed and said, "You are really annoying." While she was walking, she looked at the ground and then, without knowing why, she asked the following question. "Did you have a girlfriend before?" "Izuku, hey girlfriend?" "No, I could never be in a relationship with a girl. I guess I've just never been interested in one until now." "Shota, so far? What is the reason for that?" she asked while looking at him with quite a bit of curiosity. "Izuku, well, that's because I met you." He looked at her and gave her a warm smile. The freckled boy looked up at the sky and with a slight smile asked, "Do you want to be my first girlfriend?" Shota blushed profusely and froze him, leaving only his head unfrozen. This would say, "You don't say such things so lightly, baka." The bicolor turned around and walked away from him very embarrassed. Izuku had a drop of sweat on his head and would say, "Hey cold girl, you're not going to leave me frozen here, are you?" He just watched as the bicolor bird moved further and further away. Izuku just sighed, saying, "And now he's giving me the silent treatment. Well, now the most important thing, how will I defrost my body?" The days passed, Christmas arrived, where classes celebrated very happily, and even more so when they saw Santa's tender Airy and how she got the holiday mixed up when saying her phrases. Without a doubt this was really cute. Everyone received their Christmas presents. Momo received 2 books that she had tried so hard to get to read. She knew that it was Yusujiyama who had given them to her. Izuku received a jacket that matched that of a certain pink-haired girl, because for Izuku Mina she was best friends and they both got along well. Since that day, Shota couldn't help but look at Izuku for brief moments. He continued to bother her, as he always did. We can see how Izumi, Izuku, Bakugo, and Shota got off a bus. When they got off, they saw how a certain fire hero was waiting for them. "Shota, we're here, Dad." Endeavor saw Izuku, saying, "I'm glad you came." Izuku, "Well, she also came, so I had no choice but to come." Endeavor looked at Izumi, remembering the words she had told him at the sports festival. The fire hero looked at her, saying, "I will help you control your pyrokinesis better, since you are a fire user." Izumi, "As for you, Endeavor-san." Izuku just looked at the sky, somewhat distracted. At that, Endeavor began to run without warning with his suitcase in his hands, and in seconds he already had his suit. Behind him followed Izumi, Shota, and Bakugo. Endeavor in his thoughts would say, "And the other one?" He was very surprised to see Izuku pass over him with a serious look. He stepped on the walls of the buildings and pushed himself off with a great jump that left the rest behind in seconds. "Endeavor, it's fast." Shota and the others were speechless as they watched Izuku move a second after Endeavor. We can see how people ran scared when they saw how the crystals returned to their liquid state and headed towards a subject who was levitating over several crystal spheres while saying, "I received a revelation from the Univ. He couldn't finish speaking because a voice behind him interrupted him. "Izuku, and I was ordered to kick your ass." He spun in the air and kicked him with an axe, sending the man crashing brutally to the ground. Izuku fell to the side of him with a serious look. People looked at the freckled man speechless, seeing how he stopped him so easily. Endeavor and the others arrived at the place, seeing the defeated subject. Endeavor had a serious look and was about to say something when he saw a certain rabbit running at high speed pass by his side. Without wasting time, Izuku began to run alongside it. Mirko had a slight smile as she saw him out of the corner of her eye, saying, "You heard them too, right?" Izuku nodded his head. Endeavor entrusted the subject to a hero who arrived at the place, and he along with the others followed the rabbit and the freckled man. Izumi was using full cowl as she tried to match her speed to that of Mirko and her brother, but the closest to them was Endeavor. The difference in speed was undoubtedly abysmal. Shota looked at Izuku, and in his thoughts he would say, "He is on another level than us." Endeavor watched as a van drove by at high speed 2 blocks away with 2 people standing on the roof. Izuku looked back at the bicolor, who upon seeing his gaze knew what he was telling her. "So I immediately create several person-sized ice pillars." Mirko and Izuku coordinated and kicked the pillars in the direction where the vehicle had passed. The pillars were in the air. Izuku snapped his fingers before the ice pillars surpassed his range. In a matter of seconds everyone was in the air heading towards their targets. Mirko looked at Izuku. The freckled man took her in his arms, spinning in the air and throwing her with all his strength, causing her to go over the vehicle. Endeavor propelled himself with his flames, Bakugo with his explosions, Izumi jumped from building to building, and Shota created a path of ice over the buildings. The rabbit fell onto the asphalt with a powerful kick, breaking the pavement, causing a large piece of pavement to come out from under the truck, hitting the vehicle, making it spin in the air. The subjects who were on top of the truck jumped out before this happened. Endeavor hit one of them. Izumi and Bakugo chased the other guy who was escaping while releasing purple smoke from his fingertips, trying to create a smoke screen. The vehicle dragged itself a few meters and Mirko approached it, from which 3 subjects emerged. One of them was the same height as him, but little by little he grew until he was 2 meters and 30, and his muscles were greater than All Might's. Mirko saw this and smiled slightly, knowing that he would give her some fight. The other 2 subjects were about to approach Mirko, but Shota froze one of them. The other jumped in the air, falling on the roof of a building, and then began to escape. The bicolor began to chase him, while Mirko launched himself at the other subject. Shota was chasing her target by creating a path of ice. At one point she pushed herself with a large pillar towards him with her left arm on fire to hit him, but that guy spun in the air, causing her to pass by. Immediately the bicolor turned around and her eyes opened wide when she saw how that subject had joined his hands, which joined together forming the tip of a cannon. On the arms of that subject some light blue veins were marked, making a great light shine on the tip of the cannon. "Subject, goodbye brat." He fired his attack, but seconds before it hit the bicolor she saw how she was standing on a building, as Izuku had changed places with her, being fully consumed by the light of that attack that unfolded at a long distance, ending up hitting the river they were crossing under a bridge, creating a large explosion that generated a powerful gust of wind. "Shota, idiot!" the bicolor shouted, worried about the freckled one. That guy fell to the ground, saying, "Well, at least I hit one of those heroes." He proceeded to run away at high speed. A green ray passed at high speed to one side of Shota. Izumi had seen such a scene, and her face reflected the hatred she was feeling. A loud roar was heard coming from that river. Such a sound was heard as far as where the rabbit was, she would say. This feeling The subject stopped upon hearing the noise. The only thing everyone could see was an orange flash that crossed in a straight line. Mirko slowly turned to see his rival brutally embedded against a building just like the other subject. A few meters behind her was a person standing with his arms wrapped in flames, his hair waving to the rhythm of his flames. Endeavor had a serious look and would say, "I knew that boy is a fire user." A large amount of fire came out from between Izuku's teeth, and in seconds it surrounded the entire place in an uncontrolled way. The freckled man's torso was exposed. Shota and Izumi saw this, and were at a loss for words to discover what their eyes were seeing. The bicolor remembered his words. My quirk activated on its own and I went out of control, hurting Mirko one-san. I don't want to hurt you. Shota, is this what he meant by losing control? He is a hybrid like me. Rumi covered herself a little, feeling the immense heat coming from the freckled man's body. Izuku's eyes showed no signs of being conscious as the fire surrounding him expanded, creating a large circle of flame around him. Endeavor, his flames are more powerful than mine, this boy. Izumi Oni-chan. Bakugo, while sitting on the guy he had been chasing with the green-haired girl, looked at Izuku saying, "TCH, now everyone wants to have more than one quirk, how annoying. Mirko, I must stop him no matter what." She couldn't finish speaking when she saw how a certain bicolor crossed through that circle of fire and reached Izuku. Her body had moved without thinking, only the words she had said to the freckled boy passed through her mind. "If you ever get out of control, then I'll be there to stop you." "Shota, I told you I'd be there to stop you, idiot," he said while his arms managed to touch the freckled man's body, hugging him from behind. "Shota, I won't let you hurt anyone. So please react, Yusujiyama." The freckled man's flames were burning the top of her outfit. Izuku's eyes remained dull, while the flames around him grew larger and larger, making it impossible for anyone else to get close to them. The heat was more than Shota had used against Tetsu, so it was starting to affect even her. "Shota, duh. Izuku, please react," he said in a low voice near her right ear. Izuku's eyes returned to normal, but the bicolor didn't notice this. She, while still hugging him, would say, "I think I don't hate you completely. So, I wish I could go out for a walk with you again. But I swear I won't let you go until you're back to being the idiot I know you are. Please." He whispered the last thing. She heard a voice that would say, "Cold girl, could you get away from me? Your breasts are pressing against my back." Upon hearing those words, Shota blushed and let go of him, watching as Izuku turned around, revealing how his arms had serious burns due to the powerful flames of his quirk. He gave her a slight smile, saying, "I would be delighted to walk by your side again." Shota was about to speak when Izuku hugged her, somewhat blushing. Shota was no exception. "Shota, what do you think you're doing, Idota?" Izuku, without stopping hugging her, replied, "I don't want anyone else to see like this." "Shota, like this? What has?" She lowered her gaze slightly, seeing how the clothing on her upper part had been completely burned, leaving her with her white cleavage, which left her chest exposed, not to mention that her left breast was almost bare since the cleavage on that side had almost been completely burned. Her face turned completely red. "Izuku, I won't let you go. I don't want them to see you like this, especially the boys." Shota could feel how that hug was warm and protective at the same time. She was somewhat embarrassed and clung closer to him, saying, "I'll kill you after this. Did you understand?" Izuku understood. There was a large curtain of smoke around them, blocking the rest of them's vision. But the smoke screen would soon slowly dissipate. Chapter 19. Don't make things worse, Baka. Izumi and the others stared at the smoke screen to see if the bicolor and the freckled one were okay. Both the green-haired girl and the rabbit were worried. Especially Mirko, since she knew how afraid Izuku was of her quirk, after having hurt her in the past. The smoke had largely dissipated, and to everyone's surprise the young people were gone. They had simply disappeared without a trace. Mirko looked everywhere trying to find Izuku, but he couldn't find him, no matter how hard he looked for him. Endeavor just closed his eyes, saying, "For now, let's take care of these guys. I'll take care of looking for them later," he said while looking at the subjects who were unconscious. Mirko simply turned around and left the place. After a few minutes, the heroes who worked at the Endeavor agency arrived at the place. On the other hand, we can see how Izuku carried the bicolor in his arms while jumping on the roofs of some houses. Shota with his right hand covered his eyes so that he could not see her. She was quite blushing. "Izuku, I'm going in the right direction?" he asked as he took a great leap and landed on the roof of a 2-story house. "Shota, if we just have to move forward and we will arrive at my house." Izuku understood. He was a little blushing because he had a clear image of Shota with her white cleavage in his mind, so he couldn't concentrate well at all. More so with the situation they both found themselves in, as they both had their torsos exposed, so much so that they could feel the other's skin making contact with theirs. They were both blushing as they had never imagined that everything would end that way. Shota saw how a few meters away his family's residence could be seen. The freckled one landed right on the balcony of the two-tone room, since the door that led to the balcony was open, allowing the room to air out a bit. Izuku carefully lowered Shota down. Shota, don't even think about opening your eyes. Did you understand? Izuku, yes, you already told me more than once, cold girl, although. Shota, although? Izuku, it's a waste to have your eyes closed and not be able to see that cute expression you show when you blush. Shota blushed even more at those words, saying, Be baka. Don't you understand the situation? I'm half naked because of some idiot. After I put something on, you can open your eyes and look at me. Upon hearing what he said clearly, he wanted to correct his words. But it was too late, as Izuku gave him a somewhat mocking smile, saying, So you want me to look at you? Shota, and know me. Izuku just put his forehead against hers and without opening his eyes said, It's not like I can help but look at you. Without realizing it, I end up setting my eyes on you, since I lost our bet. Shota's cheeks were very red, but her eyes fell on the freckled boy's lips, since her lips and his were separated by just a few centimeters. If someone saw them like that, who knows what they would think, since both of them had their torsos exposed. Shota, having been able to get away from him, didn't do so, and she didn't know why. Her eyes lowered and rested on the burns on his body. Shota, we need to treat your burns, baka. Izuku, don't worry, they don't hurt much. Thank you, if it weren't for you I wouldn't have reacted. It didn't hurt you, did it? Shota, no, I could withstand your flames. Well, I told you that day, that I would be there to stop you, and I did. So you owe me one, you can thank me later. She smiled proudly, but that smile was silenced when she felt Izuku place his right hand on her left cheek, then steal a warm kiss from her. The bicolor opened her eyes slightly at this action. She could clearly feel how the freckled boy's warm lips caressed her lips. Izuku separated from her, saying, I know it's not much to thank you for what you did for me, but I gave you my first kiss as a thank you, cold girl. Shota blew smoke from his ears, not knowing what to say or how to react. At that, a voice coming from the bicolor room would say, Kya, what a cute scene. Shota recognized that voice and slowly turned his head, only to find his sister Fuyumi, who was sitting on her bed looking at both of them, while eating popcorn. Fuyumi, keep on doing your thing. Shota, since when are you there, sis? Fuyumi, well, I was preparing lunch when I heard a noise coming from your balcony. So I went up to see, and when I sneaked in I saw them both with their foreheads together. I didn't want to interrupt them, so I just stared at them until they finished talking. Shota, it's not what you think, as Sister T this. Fuyumi, yes, whatever you say. You're not going to introduce me to your boyfriend. But first of all, enter the room. You put something on, sister. And you little boy, come with me, I will heal your wounds. Don't open your eyes yet. Izuku didn't say anything because he didn't know what to say. Fuyumi grabbed his arm, saying, I'm taking your boyfriend to treat his burns. Get dressed quickly so you can tell me all the details of your relationship, she said very excitedly, while taking Izuku away. Shota's face was very red and he would say, I'll kill that fool. She covered her face with her hands, saying, Baka. Why did you have to do that? Fuyumi walked with Izuku through the halls, Izuku in complete silence, quite nervous. Fuyumi led him to the living room, making him sit on the sofa, and then went to get the first aid kit. After about 5 minutes we can see how Fuyumi grabbed Izuku's right arm, while she delicately healed him. Izuku was wearing a shirt that Fuyumi took from her brother Natsuo to give to the freckled boy. There was a warm smile on her face. Izuku just looked at her without knowing what to say. Izuku, I'm miss why you don't have to heal me. Fuyumi, don't say that boy, we have to treat your burns. Oh, and by the way, I'm Fuyumi Todoki, Shota's older sister. I'm delighted to meet you. She smiled kindly at him. Izuku, nice to meet you, I'm Izuku Usujiyama. This in its chibi version would say something like this. She is kind and more sociable. Are they really sisters? This one received a blow to the head. Izuku, ouch, why are you hitting me? Shota, you were thinking something about me, and you deserve that blow. So if you value your life, keep quiet. Izuku looked away to the side saying. We finished. Shota, don't make things worse, be baka. Fuyumi just laughed at the scene, but she was happy because she was seeing the Shota from before again, and not the cold girl she had transformed into. And she knew that the freckled boy was the reason for that. Shota looked at her sister quite blushed, saying, What happened a while ago was a misunderstanding, he and I are not a couple. Fuyumi looked at Izuku asking, Is she always like this with you? Izuku glanced at the bicolor and smiled slightly before putting on a sad look, lowering his head to say, Yes, he always treats me badly. Fuyumi-san always hits me, and she's calling me stupid all the time. And when I asked her if she wanted to be my girlfriend, she froze me and left me in the rain. She's just playing with me. Shota, what are you? Fuyumi hugged Izuku, and while stroking his head she would say, Yeah, Fuyumi-san won't hit you, I'll protect you from her. They were both in their chibi versions. Shota, do you really believe him, sister? Izuku, now he's screaming again. Shota just grabbed Izuku, separating him from his sister's hug, saying, We have to talk, why you and I? She took Izuku away by the arm. Izuku, being dragged in his chibi version, would say, Don't forget me, Fuyumi-san. Fuyumi just let out a small laugh, saying, What a nice boy. How nice it is to be able to see her act like that again. I will be supporting them in their relationship, although I will continue preparing lunch. Shota took Izuku to his room to talk in private. When I entered, she had her head down. Izuku just scratched his head awkwardly, saying, Before you kill me, can I say my last words? Shota, why did you do that on the B balcony? Izuku, do what? Shota, don't pretend you know what I'm talking about. Izuku, because of the strong blow you gave me, I now have amnesia, so I don't remember what happened. Shota, are you okay with that? It was your first kiss, and you gave it to me. You should have given it to someone really special to you. Izuku just looked at her, asking, You didn't like it? Shota looked him in the eyes and looked away, saying, Why would I have liked the kiss of an insensitive idiot who doesn't measure his actions? Izuku, I gave you my first kiss because I wanted to, my heart, my decisions. Shota just had a slight blush, saying, Then your heart is just as stupid as you. Izuku approached her, saying, I know. Shota felt Izuku once again join his lips with hers, while his right hand tenderly took her chin. Chapter 20. I'll stop looking at you if you kiss me. A tender and warm blush took over the face of that two-colored girl. Izuku separated from her, seeing how she was totally blushing without knowing what to say. He let out a small laugh, saying, You should see yourself now, you really look cute. Shota, I idiot, why did you do that again? Izuku tilted his head, asking, Couldn't I? Shota, oh, of course not. Izuku, you should have warned me before. Although if you had warned me, I would have kissed you anyway. He gave her a warm smile. The bicolor only smoked from her ears that in just one day he had already kissed her twice, and that was not what bothered her, but the fact that he could have separated from her lips but he could not do it. Her body was not responding to him, and what was quite confusing for her was that for a second her hands were about to move on their own, to surround his neck and return the kiss, as if her body was going against her will. Izuku approached the door to leave. He looked at that blushing bicolor, only to give her a slight smile and say, I wasn't joking when I asked you that question. Could you at least think about giving me an answer? After saying that, he left the room and shouted through the corridors of the house. Fuyumi one-san, I died, but I survived. Shota covered his lips with his hands, saying, You are an idiot. Her pulse was quite altered, a warm sensation hit her entire chest. Her lips could still feel the warmth of the lips of that freckled man who had kissed her with such tenderness and affection. Shota, HMPI, it's not that I'm happy that idiot K kissed me. Izuku arrived at the kitchen where he started talking to Fuyumi, having a very funny and entertaining conversation. After about 30 minutes, Endeavor and the others arrived at the house, where Izumi, upon seeing Izuku, went and hugged him upon seeing him safe and sound. Endeavor, I figured you'd be here. Fuyumi gave the rest a warm welcome. Endeavor, Fuyumi and Shota? Fuyumi, she's in her room. Endeavor, I see. They will stay here, as they will be working at my agency. Please show them to their rooms. I will return to the agency. I will not stay for lunch. Sorry. I'll leave them to you. Fuyumi, understood, I'll take good care of them. Note: I know very well that the Todoroki residence has a traditional style, but in this story they would have a normal house. This is for the plot of the story. End of note. Endeavor left the residence without saying anything else. Bakugo looked quite irritated at the freckled boy. Izuku noticed this, saying, Do you like that you look at me so much? If so, I'm sorry, but I don't play for that side. These words made the blonde explode, and he began to create explosions in his hands, ready to start a fight. But Izumi hit him on the head, telling him to calm down. She approached Izuku, saying, I'm glad to see you okay, Oni-chan. I thought something might have happened to you. Well, you and Shota disappeared from the place as if nothing happened. At that, certain bicolor heard that while going down the stairs, she would say, Midoriya, you know that weeds never die. Izuku smiled at him, saying, I love you too, cold girl. Shota blushed and looked away, saying, I hate you, you know that, right? Fuyumi, HMP with that B. She was silenced when she felt Shota's hands cover her mouth. The bicolor with a cold look would say, What were you about to say, sister? Fuyumi broke out in a cold sweat, saying, And nothing. Izuku just laughed at the scene, bothering the bicolor. Fuyumi took Izumi and Bakugo to show them their rooms in the house, as this was a slightly smaller mansion than the Yayorozu mansion. In the main room, the bicolor and the freckled one stayed. The atmosphere became uncomfortable for the bicolor since she couldn't even look at his face. Izuku noticed this, so he smirked, saying, We should kiss to break the silence. Fuyumi returned to the living room to find Izuku frozen up to the beginning of his neck. Fuyumi, what happened? Izuku, well, she told me I should be a little colder. And well, I'm trying. Fuyumi just let out a small laugh at the bad joke he had told. On the other hand, we can see how the bicolor walked through the garden of the house blushing because of those words of the freckled man. Shota, gosh, it's hard for me to look him in the eyes after he kissed me. Silly. She couldn't get the fresh memory of those two kisses out of her mind, which made her blush like never before. After 30 minutes, lunch would be ready. Izuku and Izumi helped Fuyumi set the table. Once everyone at the table thanked everyone for the food and began to eat. As Izuku tasted the food, his eyes lit up with a great sparkle, and he would say, Fuyumi one-san, this is delicious. I've never tried anything like this before. The boy who marries you will be very lucky to taste your delicious food, he said while eating as if there was no tomorrow. These words slightly saddened Fuyumi, who thanked the compliment with a slight pink tint on her cheeks. Shota was next to Izuku, and she noticed how those words had made her sister blush slightly. So without hesitation he lightly elbowed Izuku, who choked on his food. Izuku, hey! Why are you hitting me? Shota, without looking at him, answered. Because I felt like it, idiot. She ate quite angrily without knowing the reason. Fuyumi noticed this and smiled slightly. After a few minutes, Natsuo arrived from the university. He introduced himself to his teammates from the bicolor. Izuku and Natsuo got along really well in just a few minutes, as if they had known each other before. This caught Fuyumi's attention, noticing how Izuku could easily empathize with the people around him, except for Bakugo, who hated the freckled boy. Natsuo, and tell me Izuku, I see that you have a good physique, so I deduce that you must have a girlfriend. These words caught Izumi's attention and made the bicolor a little uncomfortable. Izuku, no, I don't have a girlfriend. Well, I'm waiting for a girl's response to see if she accepts me as her boyfriend. Natsuo, wow, that's great. Tell me. What is that girl like? So that it has caught your attention. Izuku, let's see. He smiled slightly, and before he could say anything, Shota stood up from the table saying, Thank you very much for the food, sister. With your permission, I am leaving. She left the place, leaving Izuku and Natsuo quite confused. Izuku, well, that girl is quite stubborn and headstrong. She thinks she has to do everything by herself, without realizing that she has people who can help her. But she is charming, she cares about others even if she doesn't show it. She works hard to fulfill her dreams. Although it is difficult for her to say what she feels or what is happening to her, her eyes are beautiful. Her company makes me feel calm where I can be myself. Since I met her, she has caught my attention. I like seeing her reactions and expressions when I tease her. I just love the way she is. Natsuo and Fuyumi, as well as a certain green-haired girl, were staring at him. Izumi wondered who that girl could be. Bakugo in his thoughts would say, It's half and half, even a fool would notice. Fuyumi would just say, What beautiful words, Izuku. Natsuo, my sister is right. I hope that girl accepts you, Izuku. Izuku glanced sideways at the hallway where the bicolor was, saying, I hope you accept me too. And even if he doesn't, I'll keep trying until he accepts me. He smiled slightly. Shota was leaning against the hallway wall with her face red and her heartbeat racing. She had heard every word the freckled boy had said, which had caused a wave of emotions in her chest, a wave that hit her heart over and over again. Shota, gee gosh, you're an idiot, he said in a low voice. Natsuo, and has she ever told you that she likes your company or something like that? Izuku brought his hand to his chin in serious thought. The others stared at him except for Bakugo. Izuku, not at all. He just told me that he hates me. Natsuo, haha, classic. Fuyumi and Izumi had a drop of sweat on their heads. After that moment, they both continued eating lunch. After finishing their lunch, each of them helped Fuyumi pack her things. Izuku washed the dishes and passed them to Izumi, who dried them and gave them to the blonde to put away. Fuyumi had told him that they didn't have to do all that, but Izuku insisted, telling her that it was the least they could do for letting them stay at their house, and for having prepared lunch. Natsuo told his sister to give up since they wouldn't give in for anything. She sighed resignedly, saying, I know. After a while, we can see how Izuku was sitting outside in the yard, under a big tree that provided a lot of shade. Izuku stood with his arms crossed, remembering how he had lost control, while looking at the burns on his arms. Since he had never avoided using his fire quirk in his life for fear of getting out of control and hurting his sisters. For this reason he repressed his quirk so as not to let it out, and his body, having never gotten used to the heat of his flames, suffered those damages. This one in a low voice would say, If she hadn't been there, I would have definitely hurt Mirko-san again. I couldn't have forgiven myself if that had happened. He gave a slight sigh and said, I'll have to learn to master this quirk. Endeavor knew I was a fire user, so he asked me to come to his agency. He is very perceptive. Shota was in her room lying on her bed, unable to get the freckled boy's words out of her head. She walked to the balcony of her room and could see the cause of that sensation in her chest, sitting under that tree. Her brow furrowed and she created an ice spear in her hand, and without thinking she threw it at him. Izuku looked up and stepped back, seeing how the spear would have hit his friend if he hadn't stepped back. Izuku, hey! What's the matter? You almost hit my sword, Excalibur Baka. He saw how the bicolor created several more spears and threw them at all of them while saying, Shut up, you dumb. Izuku dodged each spear with a drop of sweat. Fuyumi from the window of the living room that overlooked the courtyard watched this and let out a small laugh, saying, "I see that you get along very well." After about 10 minutes we can see Izuku breathing heavily, leaning against the big tree, while much of the yard was filled with ice spears. Shota breathed heavily from his balcony. Izuku asked as best he could, "Why did you attack me out of nowhere?" He was trying to catch his breath. "Shota, because of you I can't be calm, nor sleep a little, idiot." "Izuku, huh? And what did I do?" Shota just ignored him and entered his room, closing the door that led to the balcony. "Izuku, gosh, what's wrong with him, tch? If she continues like this, I will end up falling in love with her even more." He let out a little laugh, saying, "I don't think I'm any better than I already am." He saw all the spears and it was a perfect opportunity for him to practice with his fire quirk. At 6 in the afternoon we can see how Shota and Izuku were walking through the streets, the freckled one carrying several bags. Well, they had gone out to buy things for dinner, all at Fuyumi's request. "Shota, why did you have to come with me?" "Izuku, well, Izumi went out to look for some things she needed, and let's be honest, Bakugo wouldn't help you even if you asked him. I also wanted to be with you for a while, without you attacking me." "Shota, you asked for it, Baka," he whispered softly. They both walked side by side. Izuku, without thinking about his words, said, "I wonder if people will they see us as a couple?" Shota, blushing a lot, would say, "Oh, of course not. And stop saying those things, you idiot." Without realizing it, her screams had made the people around her look at them. There was a mother there with her 5-year-old daughter. The girl would point to the couple, saying, "Mommy, that girl is being mean to her boyfriend, she is yelling at him." Shota was speechless as he watched everyone stare at them. Izuku approached the little girl, crouching down to say to her, "It's true, she always yells at me. But I still love her, she's a good girl." These words made the bicolor girl quite embarrassed, who grabbed Izuku by the collar of his shirt and dragged him away. Izuku in his chibi version waved goodbye to the girl. Shota felt like his face was burning so much that he couldn't think clearly. The only thing he wanted at that moment was to get away from those people who were looking at them. After a few minutes they arrived at a small bench, which was near a small park. Shota was breathing heavily as he had dragged Izuku all the way without letting him stand up. "Shota, finally. Fool, this was all your fault," Izuku in chibi version would say. "But you started yelling at me and you called the attention of the others. Shota, if you hadn't said those embarrassing words, I wouldn't have yelled at you, Baka." "Izuku, and what did I say?" "Shota, don't act like you're not a jerk, you know what I mean." "Izuku, not at all. I don't remember saying anything bad." He looked at her with a slight smile. Shota just looked away, saying, "Stop looking at me." Izuku walked closer to her, looking at her. Shota looked away, but Izuku stood in that direction. She looked away and Izuku quickly stood in front of her. "Shota, stop it, stop doing that," she said, quite blushing when she noticed how the girl's eyes were staring at her. She had become extremely nervous. "Izuku, do you want me to stop looking at you?" Let's see. "I don't want to." "Shota, I am serious, Baka." "Izuku, okay, I'll stop looking at you if you give me a kiss." He smiled at her. The bicolor, upon hearing that, blew smoke from her ears. She was quite red and said, Never." "Izuku, then I'll keep watching you until we get home." "Shota, as you wish." She started walking with Izuku at her side, looking at her with a warm and tender expression. Shota looked to the side but still felt Izuku's gaze. "Shota, okay." She put the bags on the floor and then grabbed the collar of his shirt, bringing him closer to her to give him a kiss on the lips. Izuku opened his eyes wide at her sudden action. He had certainly said the kiss to tease her and see her reaction. But he never thought she would do it. Shota's face had a tender blush. She felt how the freckled boy's arms surrounded her waist, bringing her closer to him. Izuku was reciprocating the kiss. Shota had his eyes closed, and in his thoughts he would say, "You're a fool, but..." The bicolor's hands slowly released the collar of the shirt, to rest tenderly on Izuku's chest, lovingly grabbing the shirt, while their kiss continued. The bicolor felt her heart beat like never before. She could feel how Izuku reciprocated the kiss affectionately. They both separated. Shota, while looking to the side, would say, "Oh, ready, and now stop looking at me." This slowly separated from this one. Izuku understood. "I'll stop looking at you. Although I never told you that the kiss had to be on the lips. Did you want us to kiss again so badly?" Shota Pirachu Baka. She grabbed the bags and started walking, quite blushed by her action. Izuku, grabbing his bags, followed her, and without looking at her he would say, "I'll have to look at you more often so you can give me another kiss." He couldn't finish speaking as Shota froze him to the ground. Izuku only had a drop of sweat on his head. Shota walked on with a slight smile and a blush on his cheeks. Chapter 21. I will wait for you as long as necessary. We can see how several prison guards from the Tartarus prison lay lifeless on the ground. Some fortunately were still alive but seriously injured and unconscious. The prison alarm was going off at full blast, while the entire place was being illuminated by a red light. The entire place was in complete chaos. Several prisoners ran around the place unrestrained for their freedom, without any cell to restrict them. We can see a huge subject of colossal size known as Gigantomachia. On its back was Shigaraki, who looked extremely different. This one seemed to be waiting for a specific person. Dabi was standing next to him saying, "This is a lot more fun than I thought," he said while covering various parts with his blue flames. We can see how through the corridors inside the prison, a man was walking. His face was deformed, but he kept a smile on his face while he said, "How good it feels to stretch your legs." He stopped in front of a specific cell, the door of which had a number. The person inside was sitting, completely ignoring the noise outside. But his eyes drifted to a certain place as he saw the door to his cell being forcefully torn off, revealing the person on the other side. All for one took a slight step, stopping under the frame where the door used to be, and without stopping to show that smile he would say, "I finally have the honor of meeting you, Stain. Or better known as the Hero Killer Stain." Stain looked at him with those eyes that showed total disinterest, but no emotion was reflected in his eyes. "AFO, why are you still here? I thought you might like to join the party everyone else is throwing out here. Now that security has fallen, we are free to escape this pigsty. Don't you want society heroes to fear you again? Don't you feel like piling up the bodies of the heroes like that time?" On the other hand, we can see how in the Todoroki house, Fuyumi was preparing dinner, enjoying the company of a certain green-haired man who was helping her. Shota was in his room's bathroom taking a shower. While the water wet every part of his body, the bicolor's cheeks had a tender pink tint. Her heart couldn't return to its normal rhythm, since that kiss she gave to the freckled boy. Shota couldn't just forget that moment as if nothing had happened, when he realized she was already kissing him. What was I thinking when I did that? That's what she was wondering. How was it possible that she couldn't stand him looking at her, to end up giving him a kiss? But the moment Izuku held her waist and kissed her back, her hands slowly rested on his chest, only to kiss him with some affection. Deep down in all her thoughts and emotions, there was one fact that even if she denied it, it was true, and that simple fact was that she had liked that kiss. Yes, she was happy with the first and second kiss he stole from her, but the third kiss they gave each other felt different and unique to her. She had liked that kiss, his taste, his caresses, his lips. Yes, now that insensitive idiot had begun to cause slight feelings in her. Although they were slight, she knew they were growing at an accelerated pace. And that was what she feared most. She had already fallen in love once and had been hurt. She didn't want to go through the same thing, at least not a second time. But Izuku, with his way of being, with that attitude, had managed to get into her life without her consent. And the worst of all was that she had promised herself that she would never fall in love again, and that she would be cold so as not to get hurt. And it had worked until he arrived. She didn't know how he did it, but that idiot managed to bring out her most shy and embarrassed side, making her blush and even laugh. Without realizing it, he had broken through the ice barrier of his personality, managing to find the real Shota. Despite how blunt and cold she tried to be with him, he smiled at her without being bothered. Not to mention that on more than one occasion he had told her that he liked her cold personality, and on that beach where she told him about her past, he told her that he loved the cold Shota as much as the real Shota. The bicolor noticed the sincerity and warmth in his words. She couldn't find even the slightest trace of him lying. Now she was in a big dilemma because she did not want to be hurt, but at the same time she did not want to let those 3 kisses be forgotten as if nothing had happened. Yes, to the point that while the water ran down her body, she blushed a lot as she wondered if he would steal another kiss from her that same day. Since she kissed him, she knew that nothing would be the same again, and IZUKU knew it too, otherwise he wouldn't have kissed her. She shook her head tenderly, saying, "Gee gosh, I have to do something about this feeling, Baka." She closed her eyes and the image of the freckled man, accompanied by the words of that time, resonated in her mind. "Because in my eyes you are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. You would be the painting I would look at every day of my life, until my eyes close and never open again." Shota brought his hands to the center of his chest, saying, "This feeling started when you said those words to me. I wonder if I leave the answer to his question pending for him. Would you wait for me until you have a clear answer?" Her gaze fell on the water going down the drain. Shota didn't want to give him an answer right away. He wanted to get to know him a little more. He didn't want to go through the same thing again. But what worried her now was whether he would ever get tired of waiting for her. Thinking about that, a faint pain arose in her chest, making the bicolor put on a sad look. But a voice brought her out of her thoughts. She turned off the shower tap, listening to the voice of that person. Said person was the same one who had her so thoughtful. Behind the door of the bicolor room was the freckled one who would say, "Cold girl, it's already cold, hurry up so we can all have dinner together." The freckled boy's voice reached the bathroom. Shota opened his eyes slightly upon hearing it. Now she had a small chance to ask him if he would wait for her. She wrapped her body with a towel and headed towards the door, but before opening it she stopped. She doubted whether it was right to go out in the way she was just to ask him that question. IZUKU was about to leave when the bicolor voice would say, "I'll be down in a few minutes." IZUKU gave a slight smile, saying, "Do you want me to wait for you so we can go down together?" He let out a small laugh. Shota blushed slightly upon hearing that question. She leaned her head against the door, saying, "Why, if you want to wait for me, do it, I won't be long." IZUKU from the other side gave a slight smile, leaning his head against the door in the same way as the bicolor. He would say, "From the tone of your voice I can tell that you are embarrassed and blushing at my question. Isn't that right, cold girl?" Shota from the other side gave a slight smile, closing his eyes to respond, "I'm not. Why should I blush at the words of a fool like you?" She let out a little laugh. IZUKU, hearing her laugh, closed his eyes, saying, "I want to wait for you. I will wait for you as long as necessary. So you don't have to worry about anything." The bicolor's eyes opened slightly at his response, as if he had noticed her worries. "IZUKU, as for the answer to my question, I will wait as long as it takes. I won't pressure you to give me an answer right away." Shota, with his blushing face and a tender look, would say, "Thanks, Baka." IZUKU in his chibi version would say, "But for every day without your response there will be a small interest of a kiss for the delay." Shota in his chibi version would say, "My answer is no." IZUKU just let out a small laugh, saying, "I love your coldness." Shota tucked his strand of hair behind his ear, saying, "Wait for me, I'll get dressed so we can go down to dinner." IZUKU, okay. He sat in the hallway and a few minutes later the bicolor girl came out. IZUKU blushed slightly when he saw her. And no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't take his eyes off her. In seconds she became the center of his attention. The two-tone girl had her hair tied back in 2 Harley Quinn-style pigtails. She was wearing a black t-shirt with red letters. The t-shirt was a size larger than the one she usually wore, so it reached below her buttocks. The skin of her legs was exposed to the green-haired man's eyes. She had a short jean, but it was covered by the shirt. Shota had a tender blush as he looked to the side. IZUKU came back to his senses, looking away to the side and saying, "All right, I said I wouldn't look at you." He turned around saying, "Oh, let's go get it." She felt the bicolor's hand lightly grab her shirt. He turned to look at her, seeing how she looked to the side. "Shota, P for this time, why you can look at me, you know. Every now and then I'd like a compliment," he said in a low voice timidly. IZUKU slowly approached her, interlacing his hands with hers, making her look into his eyes, blushing slightly. IZUKU with a tender look answered, "How pathetic I am. I spent a large part of my life training to be strong and not lose to anyone. And just one kiss from you was enough for me to lose against you. I fell with just one look from you. Your sweet and tender laughter is the best melody in my ears. I don't need to see you to know how beautiful you are, my cold girl. I've never had an addiction to anything, but the moment I tasted your lips I knew I had fallen into an addiction that I couldn't escape. But it's not like I want to get out of it. Maybe your kisses, your looks, every detail about you is my greatest vice. They say that vices are bad, so I want to be bucking bad with this new vice. When I asked you to be my girlfriend, I did it out of fear. I'm afraid someone else will find out how cool you are. I know there's someone better than me out there, but please don't find him." The bicolor's eyes opened slightly, blushing her cheeks even more. Her eyes could only look at those emerald orbs. Shota tenderly tightened the grip on her hands. Lowering his gaze, he would say, "I don't want anyone better than you. I think I love you. IZUKU, do you think? Heavens then." Shota tenderly raised his head, looking at IZUKU, and slowly they both began to bring their faces closer. IZUKU would quietly say, "I will make you love me as I love you. Shota, do it." They both closed their eyes, and as they were about to join their lips, a voice would say, "Why are they taking so long? We are waiting for you to see." Fuyumi couldn't finish speaking when she saw that she had interrupted her moment. Shota separated from IZUKU, quite embarrassed. "Fuyumi, now. Weren't you just friends, sister?" "Shota, shut up, sister. She had some debris in her eye and she asked me to help her get it out, that's all." "True, Baka?" IZUKU let out a small laugh, saying, "Yes, since I took off my bandage, small pieces of debris have gotten into my eye. Thanks, cool girl, for helping me." He passed by Fuyumi, who only had a slight smile, saying, Yes, whatever you say, lovebirds. Now we are going to have dinner. Afterwards you can kiss IZUKU all you want, sis." Shota just covered his face in embarrassment. Meanwhile, in the middle of a forest, in a certain place where two katanas lay buried in the shape of a cross, Stain was standing. He was clearing the undergrowth around the grave, saying, "I came to see you today, Hanabi." He placed some roses adorning the grave, while he sat on the ground. "Stain, forgive me for not protecting you that time. The one who should have received that arrow was me and not you. Not one bucking second has gone by that I blame myself for everything that happened to you." The moonlight illuminated the whole place. "Stain, every time I close my eyes, memories come to me of you and our little IZUKU. And just for that brief second I'm happy, but once I open my eyes I wake up in this reality where you're not here. Wherever you are, I hope you can forgive me, Hanabi." The murderer had left the entire grave clean and decorated with the roses that Hanabi liked the most. He walked away from the place without looking back, ready to return to the cell where he belonged. He had only left to visit the brown-haired girl's grave to ask for forgiveness. For him, there was no longer any reason to be outside. He had decided that he would rot in prison as punishment for not having protected her. That was the punishment he had given himself. Behind him was the soul of Hanabi, who watched him walk away. He had a beautiful smile on his face while several tears fell from his cheeks. She would say, "Thanks for coming to visit me, and don't forget me, Stain." The image of this slowly faded under the beautiful light of that moon. Chapter 22. I won't let them take away what little I have. Stain reached the place where those miserable heroes had taken everything he had. the place where he lost the woman who before dying had told him that she had come to love him. He was standing in front of that cabin where he spent 3 years next to Hanabi and IZUKU, a place where that brown-haired movie made him change. The place where he met her and lost her. He just clenched his fists quite helplessly as he remembered that scene, where he saw how that arrow hit his back. Stain could see that the cabin was being covered by the forest undergrowth. He took a few steps until he reached the door. Taking a breath, he grabbed the handle and opened it, finding himself inside it. For a brief second he could see Hanabi with IZUKU in her arms sitting next to the fireplace. He closed his eyes and opened them again, noticing how dust had covered the entire place. The spider webs in the corners of the walls were noticeable. Despite being covered in dust, nothing had changed. Everything was in its place. Stain stood for a few minutes before going to where they kept the cleaning supplies. He began to clean the entire place to leave it clean, since for him that was a place that had marked his life. After about 2 hours he was outside the cabin, next to which was a mountain of weeds that Stain had pulled out. He didn't care if it was night or not. He cleaned the cabin until it was completely clean. After that he went into the cabin and lay down on the sofa next to the fireplace. The killer closed his eyes and fell asleep, saying in a low voice, "This place was everything to you, Hanabi." Finally he fell asleep, feeling a warm sensation flowing throughout the cabin. It was as if he had gone back in time, as if Hanabi was still there in that place next to him. Although Stain couldn't see her, Hanabi was kneeling watching him sleep, while she had a slight smile and touched his hair. Hanabi would say in a whisper, "I will never regret having loved you, Stain. When we meet again then." Stain opened his eyes saying, "Hanabi." He looked around, noticing that there was no one there. "Stain, HMP, it was just a dream, after all she's gone now." The murderer could see the sun's rays coming through the window. It was already dawn. Stain had fallen into a deep sleep, feeling as if the night had been short. He stood up and walked around the cabin one last time, saying goodbye to her. It was time for him to return to Tartarus prison. "Stain, I promise I'll do my best to come see you from time to time, Hanabi." After saying that, he closed the door and walked away from the cabin. In a low voice he said, "In the end you left without being able to meet your younger sister. I wonder if he will look like you." The murderer disappeared among the trees of the forest with a slight smile, having visited that place that had become important to him. Meanwhile we can see how everyone in the Todoroki house was sleeping. Izumi was sleeping hugging a pillow while saying, "No, Onaiken, I won't smash Bakugo in the face." She spoke while sleeping. Shota in his room hugged his pillow saying, "Yabaka, stop bothering me and kiss me." While she was sleeping her face was quite flushed. Fuyumi was about to go wake them up when the whole house shook abruptly. Both Shota and Izumi got up thinking it was an attack. They went out to the balcony of their respective rooms, only to see Bakugo fly past her at high speed, seeing Endeavor above him engulfed in flames. What caught their attention the most was seeing how a certain green-haired man was embedded in the ground with the top part of his clothing all torn to pieces. This scene surprised the two of them. IZUKU stood up expelling fire between his teeth, saying, "I will master this quirk no matter what it takes." "Shota, they are." "Izumi, training," they said while watching how Bakugo and IZUKU worked together to attack Endeavor, who was in a bit of trouble since these two were starting to adapt to their fighting rhythm. It is worth mentioning that the green-haired man was not using his change quirk, he was only using his fire quirk. And not having a good command of it made it a bit difficult for him to keep up with the pace. But that was not an impediment, since his body was adapting to the change at great speed. Bakugo being close to Endeavor created several explosions around him, thus forming a smoke screen. Endeavor only rose a little higher, but out of the corner of his eye he saw IZUKU behind him. The green-haired man raised his right leg vertically to kick the hero, who brutally hit the ground. IZUKU grabbed Bakugo's hand, spinning him around to throw him at Endeavor. The fire hero stood up, quite sore from that kick. Looking up, his eyes widened as he saw Bakugo's palm in front of his face. The blonde gave a big menacing smile saying, "Shiny!" The explosion hit Endeavor squarely, sending him flying, crashing into the walls surrounding the house. IZUKU fell next to Bakugo, both breathing heavily. Shota and Izumi watched this in quite amazement, at the fact that Bakugo and IZUKU were working together. IZUKU felt the girl's gaze. He raised his right hand, greeting them with his typical smile. Izumi reciprocated the greeting in the same way. Shota blushed slightly upon seeing him. She looked away and tenderly raised her hand, greeting him. Endeavor emerged from the rubble with several wounds. The hero approached these two, and with a slight smile he would say, "Well done. They gave me quite a fight. It's a shame that we have such limited space. I'm sure that limited the three of us quite a bit, otherwise I bet the fight would have been more fun." Bakugo, you're right. Endeavor, well, we're done. Go take a bath, have a little breakfast so the five of us can head off to the agency. We will have a lot of work. Both IZUKU and Bakugo nodded as they entered the house to go to their respective rooms and take a bath. After an hour we can see IZUKU, Izumi, Bakugo and Shota walking in their respective outfits behind Endeavor. They were patrolling. IZUKU walked behind Bakugo and Izumi. The two colored girls' hand and the green-haired boy sometimes came into contact with each other. This made the couple blush. For IZUKU, the bicolor looked really cute when she blushed. During the day they had spent time patrolling and catching several thieves with somewhat curious quirks. Bakugo, Shota and Izumi were a little tired because they had been active with their quirks all day. IZUKU was as if nothing happened because his resistance was far superior to that of these. They were on the roof of a small 5-story building. Endeavor looked at the city as the sun slowly set. He had a serious look, and would say, "What is this bad feeling I have? Something is wrong with all this." IZUKU slightly opened his eyes, and at high speed he grabbed Izumi and Shota in his arms, and made a great leap, saying, "Get out of the building." Behind Endeavor, a purple and black portal opened, from which a high-end Nomu emerged. Endeavor didn't have time to react as the Nomu grabbed him by the face and threw him quite far, while taking a great leap towards him. Bakugo dodged a portal that formed behind him, from which several Nomus began to emerge. IZUKU fell to the ground with both girls. They saw how several Nomus came out of that portal and began to spread throughout the city. Without wasting time, they began to destroy everything around them. Bakugo fell next to IZUKU. "IZUKU, don't separate. We will fight together, we will protect each other's backs." Each one formed a circle. "IZUKU, make sure to kill them no matter what. Don't hold back, it's either us or them." And Bakugo. Bakugo looked at IZUKU. "IZUKU, shine." The blonde gave a big smile, and without wasting time the Nomus attacked them. IZUKU put on a serious look and put into practice all the training he had done with Mirko. He would give them powerful kicks to the skull, breaking their heads with pure brute force. Shota raised his temperature to the maximum, ready to incinerate them. Izumi was using one for all at 100%. Since days before my Atsume had made her some gloves for her quirk, these were quite different from the ones Melissa creates in the original story. The green-haired girl moved around giving powerful kicks and punches, causing a lot of damage to the Nomus. IZUKU used his quirk change to switch places with his companions, keeping them all synchronized in battle. In this way they were finishing off several Nomus. IZUKU saw out of the corner of his eye how some elongated ears passed at high speed by his side. Within seconds, several Nomus flew out, crashing into the buildings in the area. A beautiful rabbit had arrived at the battlefield. She looked at IZUKU with a big smile, saying, "Did you think you were going to have all the fun by yourself?" IZUKU smiled slightly at him, saying, "I was waiting for you." These two knew what they had to do with just one look. IZUKU and the rabbit collided their fists, and each lunged at those beasts. Izumi and the others watched as in a matter of seconds several Nomus fell brutally. IZUKU and Mirko were like one person when fighting. IZUKU used his quirk change, creating a perfect synchronicity with Rumi. Both fought kicking at 100%. Once again they witnessed the abysmal difference between them and Usajiyama, who could easily be on par with the professional heroes. In another part of the city were Empty Lady, Kamui and other heroes fighting against the Nomus. The area where IZUKU and the others were located was far from the center, so there were few people in that area. So fire users like IZUKU, Izumi and Shota could fight openly. Shota grabbed the Noma's face with his hand, burning his skull with his flames to the maximum, causing his body to fall inert to the ground. The bicolor began to breathe heavily. A Nomu emerged from the rubble, launching itself towards the bicolor who was on her back. The Noma's right hand turned into a black steel spear, thanks to one of the quirks he possessed. IZUKU saw this out of the corner of his eye, and without thinking he left the rabbit to save the bicolor. He was too far away from her to use his change quirk. IZUKU ran at high speed. Shota turned around, seeing the Noma centimeters away from her. She just closed her eyes, waiting for the worst. Izumi, Onaiken! Around Mirko there were several lifeless Nomas piled up. Upon hearing the green-haired girl's scream, she turned around and her eyes opened wide at the sight. IZUKU spat a large amount of blood on the Noma's face, seconds before he had managed to enter the range of his quirk, managing to change places with the bicolor. Shota opened his eyes, finding himself several meters away from where he was. He looked at how IZUKU was pierced by the hand of that beast. The bicolor's eyes opened wide at the sight. That beast sank its arm deeper into the freckled man's abdomen, causing him to spit out more blood, while stifling his screams of pain. Shota, IZUKU! IZUKU gave a slight smile, grabbing the Noma by the face, saying, "W with this UW won't kill me, you filthy beast." The freckled man squeezed the Noma's skull with both hands, enveloping his entire body in fire. That beast screamed in pain as he tried to remove his arm from the man's abdomen, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't. Shota, without thinking, began to run towards IZUKU, but was forced to retreat by the flames that IZUKU expelled. The Noma's body was slowly being burned by IZUKU, who gritted his teeth from the pain and loss of blood, which was affecting his vision, making it blurry. The flames of this one went out when there was nothing left but the ashes of that beast. IZUKU fell to the ground on his knees while a small pool of blood formed beneath him. Shota came to him, kneeling down and hugging him while his tears wet his cheeks. "Shota, why did you do it, you idiot? I was going to be fine." She was silenced when she felt his hand touch her cheek, saying, "I'm glad to see you're okay. If something had happened to you, I would never have forgiven myself." He showed her a slight smile while blood fell from his mouth. "Shota, we have to put pressure on your wound or you'll bleed out faster. Let me help you. Please." Her voice began to break. While watching IZUKU smile tenderly at him, he would say, "I'm sorry. I told you I would wait for you all the time. But I think time didn't wait for me. Now I feel like I'm going to go with Mama Coco. And also with Rengoku-san." He gave a small, forced laugh to hide his pain. "Shota, don't say those things. You're not going anywhere. You have to stay with me, please." Shota rested his forehead against his while his hands touched his cheeks. "Shota, She couldn't finish speaking when she felt how several portals opened behind them, from which Nomas emerged. "IZUKU, get out of here. I don't want you to fight to protect me. Now I'm a nuisance to you. Shota, you are not a hindrance to me. If something happens to you, I don't know what I would do without you." The Nomas took a step forward. Shota hugged IZUKU as she ignited her fire side, ready to protect him. Rumi was approaching them, while several Nomas stood in her way. The rabbit's eyes showed absolute anger. Bakugo and Izumi were fighting side by side, unable to get close to IZUKU and Shota. The sun had already set, giving way to night, and we could see a person running at high speed through the buildings. One of the Nomas was about to hit Shota and IZUKU, when Mirko saw two katanas pass by her side at high speed. In front of IZUKU something fell that raised a large curtain of dust. Mirko could only see how the arms of the Nomas were in the air. A great thirst for blood could be felt throughout the place. Izumi could see two red eyes shining brightly from the curtain of dust. A voice would say, "When I thought I was going to my future, I realized I was just running away from the past. Hanabi, I will protect him, I swear. I will not let anyone take away from me the little I have left." The dust dispersed, revealing a man holding two katanas, emanating a thirst for blood. "Stain, I protected Hanabi that I would protect her little IZUKU." And I swear on my life that I will. I won't let them take away the little I have. Izuku looked at Stain, already blurry, and in his thoughts he would say. For some reason his voice. It looks familiar to me. The freckled man closed his eyes. Chapter 23. I have to thank you. Because? Why was the hero killer protecting his brother? That was what Izumi and Mirko were wondering, but what caught their attention the most were his words. I won't let them take away what little I have left. Stain grabbed his 2 katanas and with a quick movement of his hands, he cut the nomus into several pieces. Anger was evident in every cut, the entire ground was stained with the blood of those beasts. Stain turned around and approached Izuku, seeing how he had lost consciousness due to blood loss. He pushed the bicolor aside quite forcefully, saying, Move over, brat. Shota stood in front of him for fear that he would do something to the green-haired man. Because he distrusted the assassin, Stain looked into her eyes, noticing that concern, so he threw his katanas aside, saying, I would never do anything to Izuku. She couldn't hurt him, he was the most precious thing to Hanabi. I promised him that I would defend his Aizu. No, to our Izuku with my life. So please let me take him to get his wounds treated. Otherwise he will die and I will lose everything I have. You don't want to lose it either, do you? Shota opened his eyes slightly and moved away from Izuku. Stain, seeing him covered in blood, picked him up in his arms and jumped, landing on the roof of a building. Shota watched as the assassin walked away at high speed. Shota, don't leave me please, idiot. She saw how around her were the lifeless bodies of the nomus. Izumi was standing with blood on her face. Bakugo was embedded in the building, quite injured but conscious. Mirko was angrily stepping on the skull of one of the nomus. While elsewhere Endeavor was sitting on a pile of charred nomus. Endeavor, I got stronger too, since last time. He looked at how part of the area he was in was destroyed. The fire hero had several wounds but could still stand. Meanwhile we can see Izuku standing in a dark place. He looked around saying, And where is Mama Coco? He heard a warm, soft voice behind him saying his name. Come on, don't cry anymore, my little Izuku. Izuku opened his eyes wide and turned around to see that he was in a cabin. He could see in front of him a beautiful brunette with a baby in her arms. Izuku slightly opened his eyes at that scene. Hanabi, come on, don't cry anymore, my little Izuku, she said as she cradled him in her motherly arms, calming the baby down. That girl had a beautiful smile. The scene changed to one with a little Izuku of only 1 year and 6 months who was sitting on the floor. Next to him was that brown-haired girl. Hanabi, say Mom Izuku. Mother. Little Izuku just laughed cutely while playing with his little hands. He could see a man pass by him. In his hands he had a baby bottle. Stain, here is the baby's bottle. Hanabi grabbed the bottle saying, Thank you very much, Dad. Stain, stop calling me that girl. The girl just laughed happily as she fed little Izuku the bottle. Izuku could only look at that scene while some tears fell from his cheeks, saying, Ma. Mother. Again the scene changed to one where that little boy was in that man's arms. Hanabi, please take care of our little Izuku. Stain. I will prepare lunch, he said as he went to the kitchen. Stain, hey babysitter, don't leave me with the baby. Hanabi just left him with Izuku, who was looking at Stain. Stain with his arms outstretched held the child away from him, while saying, So when you grow up you'll surely become a hero. And in the future we will not split the mother because we will be Riva. He was hit hard on the head by Hanabi, who would say, What kind of person says that to a child? Are you stupid or do you pretend? Stain, why are you hitting me, woman? For your information, I'm not good with children. Hanabi, and hold on to Izuku tightly, you might flip him over. She took Izuku and showed him how to carry him. Hanabi, you see, that's how it's done. Now you do it, he said while giving it to Izuku. Stain, your babysitter. Hanabi looked at him seriously. Stain sighed resignedly, saying, Is this okay? he said as he grabbed IZUKU the right way. Hanabi gave him a slight smile, saying, "Yes, that's fine. You see, it's not that difficult, Stain," he said while stroking her head. "Stain, hey babysitter, don't treat me like a child." Hanabi just laughed as she walked back to the kitchen. Half an hour had passed, and she returned only to see Stain lying on the couch, IZUKU sleeping on top of his chest, hugging him. They both slept peacefully. Hanabi went for her camera to remember that moment. After taking a photo, she brought a blanket and covered them both, while she watched them sleep tenderly in front of the warm fire in the fireplace, since it was winter. IZUKU wanted to touch Hanabi, but the scene changed again to that tragic day, that day when Stain had lost her. He witnessed with his own eyes the entire scene, until the moment when Hanabi walked carrying him in her arms, despite the fact that his body was covered in blood. She was able to see the moment when she handed over her little IZUKU to a teenage Mirko, until the moment when Stain buried Hanabi. The green-haired man couldn't hold back his tears as he said, Mom. He was standing in front of the grave watching as Stian walked away from the place, leaving his 2 katanas in the shape of a cross. At that, the whole place turned dark like at the beginning. IZUKU wiped away his tears, while behind him a voice would say, "I'll look at you, you're quite a boy now, my little IZUKU." IZUKU opened his eyes slightly and turned around to see Hanabi, who was in front of him looking at him tenderly. "IZUKU, I." He felt Hanabi warmly wrap him in her arms, feeling the warmth of that maternal embrace. "Hanabi, I'm glad to see you're okay, my IZUKU. My little IZUKU." IZUKU hugged her tightly as he let out those cries he had kept in for so long. Hanabi caressed his hair while listening to him cry. She tenderly told him, "You don't know how happy I am to be able to see you once again. I wish this hug would last forever, my child, but unfortunately I have to let you go." IZUKU hugged her tightly, saying, "And no! Don't let me go, please, Mom." Those words brought several tears to the brown-haired girl who separated from him, and with tears in her eyes she would say, "Listen to me well, my little IZUKU, I will always love you, you will never be alone, you heard me. I made a good decision giving you that rabbit, I see you've grown healthy and strong. And that makes me happy, you don't know how much, but this place right now is not for you. You don't belong here, you must still live, my child. That's why I have to let you go. Even if it hurts me, I have to let you go. But promise me that you will be a great hero. I want you to be a person with a good heart. I want you to get married and start a family. I want you to live a happy life, like the life I lived with you in Stain. You too unwittingly changed my life." He could see how her arms and body began to disappear, like ashes carried away by the wind. "IZUKU, Mom, don't leave me." Hanabi, with tears on her cheeks and a warm smile, would say, "Tell Stain not to blame himself for what happened. He doesn't have to apologize to me for anything. Tell him that thanks to him I met you, thanks to both of us I was happy. Tell my sister Shia that I thank her for taking care of you with so much love and care. Goodbye, my little IZUKU." IZUKU shed more tears upon hearing those last words, as he extended his arms to try to hug her for one last time. The freckled man opened his eyes, his vision blurry, his eyes slowly adjusted to the light of the place. He could tell he was in a hospital room or something. IZUKU felt something holding his hand. The freckled boy looked to his side, seeing how a certain bicolor tenderly held his hand, while he slept with his head resting on the stretcher. IZUKU felt a warm feeling when he saw her. Shota, still asleep, didn't let go of his hand. He could notice how some tears were falling from her cheeks, and as he caressed her cheeks with his fingers, he tenderly dried her tears. Despite feeling her body in pain, Shota, upon feeling something touching her cheeks, slowly opened her eyes, which met those emerald orbs that looked at her with great affection. IZUKU, with a kind smile, said, "Oh, sorry I woke you up." The bicolor's eyes crystallized, threatening to release several tears. Without thinking, she clung to his chest while crying, "Shota, you're an idiot. You had me very worried. I thought I was going to lose you." She tenderly beat his chest while crying. IZUKU stroked her head, saying, I didn't want to worry you, Shota. Shota, while burying his face in his chest, would say. You can't just come into my life, make me love you, and then leave. You're always bothering me, staring at me. At first you were annoying, I didn't want you near me, but now I don't want you to go away from me. I don't want to lose you. So please don't ever leave me. The bicolor cried on his chest. IZUKU just hugged her tightly, saying, I would never leave you, after all, who else could bother you more than me? He let out a small laugh. Shota wiped away his tears as he couldn't help but laugh. She looked up into his eyes, only to grab his cheeks and give him a tender kiss on the lips. IZUKU blushed at that sudden kiss, but he lovingly reciprocated the bicolor kiss. Shota had a tender blush. She tenderly placed her hands on his chest, while she kissed the green-haired boy as if there was no tomorrow. IZUKU tenderly grabbed her waist, both separated after giving each other a long kiss. Shota looked away blushingly, saying, Feel lucky that he gave you a baka kiss. IZUKU touched her cheek lovingly, making her look into his eyes, asking, So, is that kiss a yes to my unanswered question? Shota buried his head in his chest again, and in his chibi version he would say, T maybe chi and maybe no. IZUKU hugged her tightly, saying, You sure know how to make me fall in love. Shota clung to him tighter, saying in a low voice, And you to me. She had a beautiful blush. At that moment Izumi entered the room. Shota separated from IZUKU, quickly sitting in the chair next to him, while pretending to look out the window. IZUKU just looked at her with a drop of sweat. Izumi, seeing her brother well, gave him a hug, saying, I'm glad to see you're okay, Anakin. I thought I would lose you. I would say with some tears. IZUKU, I can't die, weeds never die, right, cold girl? Shota tenderly nodded his head. IZUKU, by the way, how did I get here? The last thing I remember was being impaled, and then everything went blurry. Shota, you don't remember anything that happened next? IZUKU shook his head, saying, Not at all. He put on a sad look that was noticed by the two girls. Izumi, what's wrong, bro? IZUKU in his chibi version would say, I couldn't see Mama Coco. Shota hit him on the head, saying, Idiot. IZUKU just laughed lightly. Izumi and Shota told him about how the hero killer Stain saved them, and that he was the one who saved him from dying. Since Stain had taken him to UA where he asked for help, where little Eri with Aizawa's supervision healed him, but she couldn't heal him completely since her power had thawed, and Aizawa had to stop her. So on his stomach he had a large scar, and on his face he had the scar caused by his flames. The scar he had was from the beginning of his nose, covering part of his left eye and part of his forehead. Izumi handed him a small mirror so he could see himself. IZUKU gave a slight smile when he saw the scar on his face, saying, It's perfect. IZUKU, if Eri-chan hadn't gone out of control, she could have left you without any scars. IZUKU, the important thing is that he brought me back from death. Now we both have a scar, my cold girl. IZUKU looked at her and gave her a big smile. Shota lowered his head, quite blushed, feeling his heart racing faster. IZUKU, and what happened to Stain? Izumi, well, being a prisoner who escaped from Tartarus prison, when you take him to the UA for help. The teachers recognized him and caught him. Well, to tell the truth, he didn't put up any resistance. All he asked was for you to be cured as soon as possible. His only concern was to save you. Knowing he would be caught, he took you to the UA. His words to Aizawa-sensei were, I have no intentions of escaping or resisting, I just want them to save IZUKU, that's all. After all, I was on my way to prison, I had no plans to stay free. The teachers didn't know how to react when he knelt down and begged for you to be healed as soon as possible. IZUKU, I see. He stood up, putting on his pants and his shirt that was at his side. Shota, where are you going? IZUKU, isn't it obvious? Let's see him after all. I have to thank him on behalf of myself and Mom. The freckled boy smiled as he left the room. Final, Part 1. Shota and Izumi stood in the room, not knowing how to react. There was definitely something that united the paths of those two. It was not for nothing that Stain protected IZUKU. IZUKU was walking through the halls of the academy, since he had been asleep in the infirmary. As he walked, he put on his shirt since his torso was uncovered. A slight smile of happiness could be seen on his face. The freckled boy could clearly hear the sound of a helicopter outside the academy. Without thinking, he began to run through the halls. On campus, we can see how a helicopter arrived, from which Hawks and 3 soldiers who were wearing black clothing got out. Hawks looked at Stain, who was next to Aizawa and Tashinori. Director Nizu was standing next to them. Stain, without saying anything, began to walk towards the helicopter. He had shackles and chains on his feet, as well as on his hands. Around his neck he had an anti-quirk collar. That helicopter would take him to a high-security prison, until they managed to repair the damage that was caused in the Tartarus prison after the villains escaped. Stain walked with a slight smile, knowing that he was able to save IZUKU, and that he was able to see him once again. Both Hawks and the soldiers accompanying him were on alert in case he tried to do something. Stain had no intention of even escaping. Stain stopped dead in his tracks, glancing at Tashinori and saying, "Oh, by the way, during the escape of the prisoners from Tartarus prison, All for One wanted to recruit me to join his ideals. I refused, but several prisoners joined him. You better be careful, since he wanted me to catch a brat named Izumi Midoriya. He mentioned something about one for all. I don't know what that is, but I'm warning you all to protect your hero students." Tashinori opened his eyes wide upon hearing those words. Stain was about to walk when a voice stopped him. "Then we just have to stop them. Just like you, I want to protect the people I love. Izumi is my sister. Will you help me?" Stain turned around, seeing how a green-haired man came face to face with him. Stain's eyes opened slightly when he saw him. "Aizawa, Yusujiyama." "IZUKU, thanks. If it weren't for you, I would have died. You've saved me twice now, Stain. The first time was when you found me in that alley, and the second time I don't need to mention it, do I?" Stain didn't know what to say. IZUKU clenched his fists, as a few tears fell from his cheeks. "I saw how you protected Mom until the end. She told me not to blame yourself for her death. That she was truly happy from the moment she met you until the end of her day. Those were his words before I woke up. He is certainly sad that he couldn't spend more time with you, but those 3 years he spent with you were the happiest." Stain lowered his head, taking a deep breath, feeling a lump in his throat, a lump of emotions and various things. He took a step forward, raising his arms and passing them behind IZUKU's head to give him a tight hug. While holding back his voice, he would say, "Thank you. If you had died, I wouldn't have forgiven myself. I promised Hanabi's grave that no matter what happens, I would protect you, boy. You've grown a lot. She would be proud of you." IZUKU reciprocated the hug because despite him being a murderer, he took him into his arms and took care of him along with Stain. And for IZUKU that was more than enough. He was the closest thing to a father figure in his life. Stain gave a slight smile as he separated from him, bringing his hands to his pants pocket and taking out a wrinkled photo and giving it to the freckled man. "Stain, here, please keep it. I think you need it more than I do." IZUKU saw the photo where he was in Hanabi's arms next to the fireplace. IZUKU's eyes glazed over as he saw his mother in the photo. "Stain, ever since I lost her, I've carried that photo with me for the past 12 years. Every day I looked at her again and again, thinking how lucky I was to be able to meet her. She was a unique and curious girl. But her heart was the purest I've ever known. When she held you in her arms, her smile was brighter than ever. I know you can preserve his memory better than I can, IZUKU." IZUKU, with a slight smile, replied, "Thank you." The others could only watch in silence. No one wanted to interrupt that moment. "Stain, I will help you protect your sister. But I don't know if they will allow it," he said as he looked at the rest. IZUKU looked at the rest and bowed, saying, "Please, Director Natsu, Aizawa, All Might Sensei, let Stain help us." Stain took a step towards the heroes, saying, "During my stay in Tartarus, I have met each inmate. I know their quirks and how dangerous they can be. My quirk will help them a lot in this fight against All For One. They will need all the help they can get. He will fight using those beasts. Please let me fight with you. After this is all over, I will return to prison. Niza analyzed the situation for a moment, and then gave a smile, saying, Perfect, then we count on your help, Stain Hero Killer. If something bad were to happen, I will take responsibility. Inform your superiors, Hawks. Hawks nodded his head. IZUKU, thank you, Director Nizu. Nizu, well, I'll take care of gathering all the teachers and students in the classroom, to explain the situation to them. Since this threatens all of our students, it is better that we take the initiative before it is too late. 30 minutes later, we can see how both teachers and students were gathered in a large hall. Nizu, okay, I won't beat around the bush and get straight to the point with the situation. We are now informed that the villain All For One that All Might defeated has escaped from Tartarus prison, joined by several dangerous inmates. The hero killer Stain will help us fight against All For One. He knows better than anyone how dangerous they can be if they get another quirk from All For One. Yesterday the city was attacked by an army of Nomus. There were not many injuries, thanks to the fact that several heroes were trained to fight them. To win this fight we will need all the help we can get. Classes will be suspended. Teachers will be in charge of training them to their limits, so they can fight in this battle. We don't know when All For One will attack, but all we can do is be prepared. Training will start from now on, so go put on your sports suits to get started. I expect a lot from you guys. Upon hearing the director's words, several were motivated, others were worried about the situation but listened to their director and left the room. Except for Class A, the bicolor watched as IZUKU stood next to Stain with a serious look. Nizu, now that only Class A and the teachers are left, it's your turn to speak, Tashinori. Tashinori took a breath, saying, What All For One seeks is to obtain the One For All. Right now you may be wondering, what is One For All? One For All is my quirk that is passed down from generation to generation with the goal of defeating All For One. I was the 8th bearer of One For All. That was my quirk. The reason All For One is coming for young Izumi is because she is the current wielder of One For All. In other words, she is my successor, the person I chose to be the new symbol of peace once I am gone. The whole place fell silent. Tashinori, the origin of One For All is a long story to explain, but if All For One manages to steal One For All from young Izumi, then Stain, we will all die. Everyone looked at Stain. Stain, what? Don't judge me for telling the truth. Tashinori, being in this situation, it is most likely that you also know this secret of mine. I know this may be a lot for some, but Momo, we understand All Might Sensei. Class A will protect and fight to prevent All For One from stealing One For All. Mina, we will give our best. Aizawa, as long as he's within my field of vision, he won't be able to steal any quirks. Tashinori, seeing how everyone was determined to fight, gave a slight smile. Since that day a week and 3 days passed, a week in which the students were pushed beyond their limits, being trained by the heroes. Mirko was in charge of training Kirishima by giving him powerful kicks, so that he could further harden his unbreakable form. While training the green-haired girl to strengthen her body, Gran Torino helped her master One For All. IZUKU and Shota trained with endeavor to master and enhance their fire sides. Despite training together, they had hardly had time to talk alone. Shota knew that now was not the time, but he still wanted to spend a few minutes alone with him. President Mike trained Jairu, Stain trained Toguro Kamakiri, helping him with the sharp blades he could pull out of his body. All the students were training tirelessly, managing to make quite a bit of progress in such a short time. The other academies had already been informed of the situation, so they were also training their students to be ready for the villain's attack. While in the shadows, several dangerous villains were gathering, forming an army that was growing with each passing day. All For One was with Shigaraki inside some recovery tubes, which contained a green liquid. A doctor watched the screens of the machines that said, Restoration at 75%. Doctor, when I reach 100%, my lord's new reign will begin. He turned around, seeing a long hallway in which several capsules with high-end nomas were displayed. those creatures were waiting to be awakened. They were not wasting their time either, as they were building their own army for that battle that would define the future of everything. It being a Thursday night, we can see that it was already nighttime, and some people went to sleep exhausted after the hard training they were doing. We can see how a certain bicolor was lying on her bed. She was looking at the ceiling of her room, while holding in her hands the mask that the green one had given her that time. Shota closed his eyes, remembering that kiss he gave her after she woke up in the infirmary. She blushed slightly, thinking, "It's been a week now, and we've been able to talk alone. A week without him bothering me, without a kiss from him. I want to be with him, even if it's just this." She stood up and walked to the ballroom in her room, her eyes falling on the campus, which was illuminated by some streetlights. The bicolor saw how the green-haired boy was sitting on one of the benches on campus looking at the sky. She opened her eyes slightly. Shota, without thinking, left his room to be able to spend some time with him. Without realizing it, he was showing a beautiful and slight smile. Once she left the bedroom, she began to walk towards the freckled boy, and when she was about to arrive, she could see a light blue girl sitting next to him. The bicolor quickly split behind some trees, trying to listen to their conversation. "Nijire, I didn't expect to see you on campus at this time," she said somewhat nervously, remembering their first and last meeting, since they had not spoken or seen each other since then. "IZUKU, well, I just wanted to get some air, that's all." "Nijire, you know, I think you look better without the mask, although I would have liked to beat you that time." "IZUKU, well, the reason I took off my mask was because I lost to her." Nijire, quite curious, asked. "She?" "IZUKU, yes, I lost to a cold girl," he replied while letting out a small laugh. "Nijire, cold girl? I don't understand." "IZUKU, let's just say it's a long story." Nijire stared at him for a few seconds, an action that Shota noticed, feeling quite annoyed. The light blue-haired girl got a little closer to IZUKU, coming face to face with him. "IZUKU blushed slightly," he would say. "Senpai." "Nijire, I don't understand, but that cold girl you mentioned, you like it, right?" he asked with great interest. Shota heard that question and blushed slightly. "IZUKU, to tell the truth, I really like her." "Nijire, tell me, are you a couple?" "IZUKU, I don't know, since her answer to me asking if she wanted to be my girlfriend was maybe Kai and maybe no. It wasn't very clear," he replied with a small laugh. The bicolor puffed out her cheeks tenderly, saying in a low voice, "Baka, don't laugh." "Nijire, MMIC." It wasn't a clear answer on his part. "IZUKU, I know. But I still like that part of her, I adore her," he replied with a sincere smile. "Nijire, I see. I wish you luck with her, Kohai." "Well, I'll go and rest, see you tomorrow," he said to approach IZUKU to give him a kiss on the cheek, but before he could do so, IZUKU was pulled back by a person. Nijire watched as a bicolor grabbed IZUKU by the arm, while looking at her seriously. The light blue-haired girl let out a little laugh, saying, "I'm sorry. I forgot that you belonged to someone. Goodbye, brother." She turned around and walked away from them. IZUKU glanced sideways at the bicolor, who was somewhat upset. "IZUKU, you know it's rude to listen to other people's conversations, right?" Shota, without looking at him, would say. "It's your fault, idiot." IZUKU hugged her, saying, "I already missed that part of you." Shota slowly returned the hug, saying in a low voice, "I missed you too." They both sat on the bench next to each other. The bicolor one rested her head against the freckled man's left shoulder, while her right hand rested on his left hand. IZUKU grabbed his hand in a tender couple's hold. Shota tenderly squeezed his hand with his, saying, "My answer was a silly yes." "IZUKU, what do you mean?" I asked, pretending not to understand. "Shota, you know, that's what you asked me." "IZUKU, and what did I ask you?" Shota, quite embarrassed, replied, "Why, yes, I want to be your girlfriend." "IZUKU, I'm sorry, I didn't hear very well what you said." "You can repeat it again." "Shota, I said if I want to be your boyfriend." She couldn't finish speaking as IZUKU took her by the chin, stealing a tender kiss from her. The bicolor only closed her eyes, reciprocating the kiss. That kiss was a long one. When they separated, IZUKU looked into her eyes while resting his head on hers. "IZUKU, I missed kissing you. I'm happy that the cold girl I love has accepted me." Shota was very sorry but lowered her gaze, saying, Please take care of me, IZUKU." "IZUKU, when all this is over, would you like to have our first date as a couple?" Shota nodded slightly. IZUKU lifted her chin to look her in the eyes. The bicolor just wrapped her arms around his neck, asking, "Can you give me another kiss?" IZUKU smiled at him, saying, "I'll give you all the kisses you want, my lovely cold girl." After saying those words, they both approached each other's lips and gave each other a warm kiss, officially consolidating their relationship, expressing what they felt for each other in that kiss they were giving each other. Final, Part 2. The couple separated from the kiss, blushing slightly. "IZUKU, I love you, my cold girl." Shota showed him a beautiful smile, saying, "And I love you, Baka." "IZUKU, do you want to go back to the dorms or do you want to stay here a little longer?" Shota, "Nope, let's stay here a little longer. After all, there will be training tomorrow and we won't have much time to see each other." "IZUKU, as you wish, my cold girl." He took her by the waist and then lifted her into the air in a spin, while he looked at her with a smile under the bright moonlight. Shota was certainly happy to feel loved, and even more so knowing that the freckled boy really loved her with all his heart. No matter how much she tried to be cold, he always brought out his shyest side without much effort. He knew how to make her smile. He knew how to get into her heart in an annoying but warm and fun way. Stain, who was on the roof of the bedrooms, looked at the couple from a distance. He had a slight smile as he looked at the moon, saying, "Our lot grew quite a bit, Hanabi. No matter what happens, I will protect him with my life, Hanabi," he said while holding his two katanas in his hands. The next day we can see how the students were in their hero costumes. They were about to start training. Their teachers also had their hero costumes. Izumi was talking to IZUKU, who was smiling happily. The bicolor was with them, and as they were about to start training, they heard a loud bang coming from the city. Whatever was happening caused a tremor that was felt all the way to the academy. Tashinori put on a serious look and said, "It's him. Aizawa, get ready to act." After saying that, everyone set off at high speed towards the city. Hawks was flying through the air. Mirko was running with a big smile. Alongside him was Izumi with the full cowl, managing to run at the speed of the rabbit. IZUKU and Stain were jumping through the buildings. The streets trembled with every step Gigantomachia took. On his back were Shigaraki, Dabi, and the rest of the league. People evacuated the streets in fear within seconds. That colossal villain stopped dead when he saw the heroes coming from afar. IZUKU and the others stopped about 30 meters away from them. Empty Lady was at Ryukyu's side. The heroine switched to her giant form to take care of Gigantomachia. In front of this, several portals were opened, works of Kurogyri. Finally, the leader came out of the portals, revealing a young man of approximately 38 years old. His hair was a platinum color. But Izumi and the others felt that fear from that time, recognizing that this was all for one. AFO gave a big smile, saying, "This is the welcome I've been waiting for. Finally we will face the successor of One for All, Izumi Midoriya." The green-haired girl had a serious look. AFO extended his hands to his sides, causing several nomas to emerge from them. There were approximately 60 of them. Izumi saw Muscular come out of one of the portals with a big smile. And some villains who were in Tartarus prison. Aizawa in his thoughts would say, "They are more than I expected, but I know we can handle everyone." The big three were present at the scene, and several heroes kept arriving. Endeavor fell from the sky with an imposing look. "AFO, I'm sorry, current number 1 hero, but I didn't come for you but for that brat. Endeavor, this battle will come to an end on this day." Dabi glared at Endeavor as his blue flames covered his body. "AFO, so, shall we begin? Monoma, let the bucking be armed." After saying that, all the heroes and villains launched themselves at each other. Endeavor came out at high speed, wrapped in flames, grabbing Dabi's face. Empty Lady clashed fists with Gigantomachia. Shigaraki wanted to use his large-scale deterioration, but Aizawa nullified his quirk. Muscular was about to touch Izumi, but IZUKU sent him crashing into a building with a brutal kick. He was using both of his quirks at the same time, change and fire. Toga went against Uraraka and Tsuyu, but Kendo with his quirk hit her repeatedly until she was unconscious. Stain fought alongside Shota while the bicolor paralyzed the Nomus and burned them. The entire city was now the center of a pitched battle, where you killed or were killed. Since this was not a training, it was a real fight, where they were risking their lives. Mineta threw his sticky spheres, sticking several Nomus to the ground, giving Toguro the opportunity to cut them down in seconds with his sharp blades. In one part of the city, several explosions could be heard accompanied by a shiny. While at the academy we can see how Toshinori was sitting on a chair with his suit, which was too big for him. Next to him was a little bird with a little horn. Toshinori, I'm ready, Eri-chan. The little albino girl nodded her head. IZUKU was facing Muscular, who was giving him quite a fight, but due to his enhanced senses IZUKU showed great dominance in the battle. AFO just watched as the entire field was destroyed in seconds. He raised his gaze to see how Izumi was above it. The green-haired girl had green rays coming out of her body. This hit a blow with 100% of one for all. AFO created a barrier above it, protecting itself from the blow. The green-haired girl's blow generated a large gust of wind that sent several Nomus and students flying. AFO gave a slight smile and was about to raise his arm, but it was rooted to the ground by Ibra's quirk. This one from his back took out 3 dragon columns that took Ibra and Izumi, impacting them against the ground. Nijire, seeing this, attacked AFO with the maximum power of her waves, destroying the columns completely, thus freeing the girls. AFO looked at the light blue skin and raised his hand, attacking it with several thorns that came out of the ground. These were about to touch it when something fell from the sky, breaking all the thorns, creating a small crater and a gust of wind. A curtain of dust was in the place. AFO put on a serious look when he saw how 2 blue eyes shone from that curtain of dust. The curtain dissipated, revealing All Might in his muscular form. All Might, everything is okay now. Why? Because I am here. Izumi, All Might. AFO, how long do you think you can last like that? Sooner or later you will return to your skeletal form. All Might, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but... He lifted the top of his suit, showing how that wound was no longer there. He now had his normal body. All Might, that wound is no longer there. After saying that, a great pressure overwhelmed the entire place. Without thinking twice, All Might shot towards AFO at high speed, colliding their fists. We can see how IZUKU was standing on top of Muscular, who was embedded against the asphalt out of combat. The freckled man had his suit torn, leaving his torso exposed. The heroes were gaining ground in the fight by the second, as All for One's army was being rapidly reduced. Momo and other kids helped Empty Lady against Gigantomachia. Stop playing and finish them off, Gigantomachia! Gigantomachia, yes, master. The giant's eyes rolled back. Shinso was on top of a building with his voice-changing mask. Empty Lady was breathing heavily, with quite a few wounds. Momo, well done, Shinso. Now we have to help others. Shinso, imitating AFO's voice, would say, I want you to finish off all the remaining Nomus. Within seconds the giant began to move, attacking the rest of the Nomus with his fists, as if they were flies. With Gigantomachia on their side, the battle would end soon. Hawks was fighting against Twice, who was already on the verge of losing consciousness, due to the injuries on his body. The red-winged hero stood holding a long, blade-like feather, saying, Give up, Twice, I don't want to have to kill you. In Shota's fight she was on par with Stain as they watched the lifeless bodies of the Nomus. The bicolor was breathing heavily. Stain, wow, I'm moving more today than ever. Shota, thanks for helping me. Stain, I only protect what IZUKU loves most. I don't want him to go through the same thing I went through. Shota didn't fully understand those words, since she didn't know about Stain and Hanabi's past. They heard a loud bang, and they couldn't help it, They looked up and saw how several meters above them they saw green, yellow and red flashes colliding with each other. The green-haired girl was fighting alongside All Might against All for One. Mirko was standing over the bodies of several gnomes. The rabbit spat out some blood while showing a big smile. IZUKU just watched as Izumi and All Might fought against AFO, who opened his mouth slightly as he watched Izumi fall at high speed. Without thinking, he caught her before she hit, noticing how the green-haired girl was breathing heavily while also having some wounds. All Might crashed into a building, completely destroying it. All for One fell to the ground with a different appearance. His height had increased, surpassing All Might. Just like in their second fight, his arm was deformed, but now both of his arms were the same shape, while those dragon columns came out of his back. He was about to speak but had to dodge 2 kicks from IZUKU and Mirko. AFO made a great jump, dodging 2 cuts from Stain, who fell several meters away from him. AFO, so you didn't join me but you joined the heroes, you disappointed me, Stain. Stain turned around, showing how one of his katanas had blood on it. AFO slightly opened his eyes. The killer proceeded to lick the blood to paralyze AFO, achieving his goal. Stain, do it now! Izumi and All Might stood in front of All for One, clenching their fists, saying, "One for all, 1,000,000%. United State of Smash." The blow from both of them hit AFO squarely in the face, sending him flying at high speed towards the top, while his blood floated through the air. Due to the blow of these, an immense gust of air sent everyone flying quite far away. AFO, being in the air, saw how in front of him were Shota, Endeavor and IZUKU. The 3 of them were at their maximum flames, clenching their left fists. "Endeavor, now!" Shota and Endeavor would say. "Incandescent fist, jet burn." IZUKU, 1 punch. "Here I go, incandescent fist, jet burn." The attack of the 3 hit AFO squarely, consuming it completely. A large explosion of flames was created in the sky. The heat of this was felt as far as where the others were. Endeavor hugged Shota as they were sent flying by the explosion. IZUKU, being closer to it, was consumed by the flames. "Izumi, Onaiken!" Endeavor fell to the ground, creating a small crater, taking the full impact, protecting the bicolor. All Might, it's finally over. All for One was defeated. Several had a slight smile that it was all over. They saw something fall from the sky. Stain, without thinking, caught the person who fell, which was IZUKU. "IZUKU, thanks, that explosion didn't give me time to use change. Well, to be honest, I no longer have the energy to even move." "Stain, it's all over, boy." He looked at how almost 70% of the city was destroyed. Shota, without thinking, ran until he reached IZUKU, giving him a hug, saying, "I'm glad to see you're okay, Baka." "IZUKU, I would like to hug you but I have no energy left." "Shota, it doesn't matter." She didn't care who saw them and gave him a kiss, because she was very worried about the freckled boy. Those from class had just watched this scene in shock. Izumi was just blushing as she watched them kiss in front of everyone. Mirko had a tender pout when he saw how affectionate the bicolor was with his brother. Endeavor just gave a slight smile as he saw his daughter happy. Finally, that battle had come to an end. Final, Part 3. Since that day when All for One was defeated, the heroes could breathe a sigh of relief, since in that fight we defeated several villains who escaped from Tartarus. 2 weeks passed since that day, weeks in which the entire academy was busy. In what? You might be wondering. Well, since a large part of the city was severely damaged during the fight, we were all busy helping with its restoration. With the help of several heroes, we managed to advance quite quickly with the reconstruction, not to mention that we received help from nearby cities. The good thing about all this was that All for One could no longer cause any more harm to anyone, and with All Might back as the symbol of peace, people could be calmer. Now Izumi would have more time to master One for All. Who knows, maybe in the future someone will appear who is even more dangerous than All for One. Certainly the destiny is uncertain, but for now that is the least of it. Being so busy with rebuilding the city, Shota and I's first date was postponed. But that doesn't mean we haven't been able to spend more time together. Fuyumi hasn't stopped bothering her since she found out we were officially a couple. And Mirko? Well, she's been a little upset, because of the kiss Shota gave me after the battle. I guess it's the typical jealousy of a sister. Izumi has become closer to me and was very happy when she found out about our relationship. Anyway, let's get back to the present. Aizawa, we're going on vacation for a week. The whole class screamed with excitement. Aizawa, the director said that they deserved a break since they've been trying so hard lately. With the help of the heroes who will come from outside, we will be able to finish rebuilding the city faster. They will leave in 3 days. Mina raised her hand asking. Sensei, where are we going on vacation? Aizawa, well, I don't know that yet. I think the director wants to keep that a secret, so it's a surprise. Mina, if you tell me I won't be able to sleep, I need answers. Aizawa, Ashido, don't be so dramatic. Well, since you won't have classes these days because we'll be busy with repairs and such, you have the day off and can go get your things ready, go shopping, etc. Now I'll count to 5 for you to get out of here, otherwise I'll put you to work. 1. IZUKU grabbed the bicolor girl by the hand at high speed, to carry her in his arms and jump out the window. Aizawa 2. They all left at high speed, leaving the room empty. Aizawa had a tick in his left eye, it would say. Why aren't they this fast when I give them a test? IZUKU was running with the bicolor in his arms. Shota, why are you running, Baka? IZUKU, don't look back, he might be chasing us. Shota, nobody is chasing us. IZUKU stopped dead in his tracks, looking back, giving a sigh of relief. He gently lowered the bicolor, saying, I'm sorry, I thought Aizawa-sensei would chase us. I don't trust his words, you know how he is. In a second that you look away, bam, surprise test. That's why I grabbed you as quickly as I could to escape from the place. Shota just let out a small laugh, saying, Gosh, you're still as Baka as ever. She tenderly grabbed his hand, saying, Now that we finally have some free time, do you want to have our first date? IZUKU gave her a short kiss on the lips, saying, Of course. Shota, then let's go change clothes. They both began to walk towards the bedrooms, where each one had to separate to go to their rooms. After 10 minutes, IZUKU was standing outside the campus waiting for his cold girl. The freckled man was wearing a tight-fitting black sleeveless t-shirt, military-colored jeans, and his red tennis shoes. IZUKU was looking at the sky when he heard the voice of that girl he loved. He turned his gaze to find a bicolor girl who had her hair in 2 pigtails like Harley Quinn, wearing a beautiful black dress with a heart-shaped opening in the center of her chest. This one had a beautiful white rose embroidered on the area of her left shoulder. This ended just before reaching the knees. The bicolor had a tender blush and very embarrassed asked, How do I look? She did not receive a response in words, but was taken by the waist and received a tender and warm kiss from her boyfriend, which she only responded with great affection. IZUKU, upon separating, replied, You look really beautiful, my cold girl. Shota, thank you. IZUKU took out his phone and in his chibi version began to take endless photos. Shota in his chibi version would say, Stop taking pictures of me, Baka. IZUKU, ready, I already have my new wallpaper. Now I will be able to see you every morning when I open my eyes. These words made the bicolor blush to the maximum. Shota, gosh, let's go to our date, she said as she took him by the hand and started walking. IZUKU only had a slight smile when he saw that tender facet of that bicolor. After 10 minutes they were in an ice cream shop, both sitting at a table enjoying a delicious ice cream. IZUKU looked at the bicolor who had a beautiful smile. Shota noticed how her boyfriend was looking at her, so she asked, What's happening? Don't tell me I have something on my face, he asked while touching his cheeks. IZUKU let out a small laugh, saying, I still remember when you said that even if I were the last boy on earth you wouldn't be with me. And look at us now, we're on a date. Shota looked away tenderly, not knowing what to answer. IZUKU, my cold girl, can you look me in the eyes? Shota blushed deeply and looked at him, only for IZUKU to give her a sincere smile and say, I love you. These words saddened the bicolor and made her very happy. She timidly responded. And I love you too, Izuku. The couple spent the whole day together walking around various places, such as the cinema among other fun places until nightfall. Izuku and Shota were sitting on a bench near some swings in a small plaza. The bicolor was resting her head on his right shoulder, while their hands were intertwined. The couple was silent as they looked at the beautiful moon that illuminated the entire place. Izuku, and one time we met at the place where I first met you. You remember, right? Shota opened his eyes slightly as he faintly remembered his childhood. You. Izuku, I see you finally remembered me. When I saw you for the first time, you already had that scar on your eye. You were already beautiful to me before then. I remember you crying on the swings because your classmates pushed you aside because of your scar. You kept telling me you were ugly because of that scar. With or without your scar, you were already beautiful to me. I told you that if we never saw each other again, we would do so in the future. And I am more willing than ever to keep that promise I made to you. Shota had tears in his eyes, as he couldn't believe that he had forgotten that memory of when he first met him. And more so that promise. Izuku wiped her tears, saying, If I am enough for you, then let me spend the rest of my life by your side. Shota just hugged him with all his might, saying, Yes, I do. I want you to be in my life and I want to be in yours. I want to spend the rest of my life with the boy I love. The bicolor was crying. Izuku hugged her tightly, saying, That's how it will be, my cold girl. There couldn't be a better future if it's not with you. And so I spent the days of my life with the woman I love. Time skip. Izuku slowly opened his eyes, looking at the roof of a cabin. He yawned as he stretched his arms. He looked to the side, seeing how on the nightstand there was a frame with a photo. In the photo you could see Izuku carrying a beautiful bicolor girl in a wedding dress. Izuku walked to his bedroom window, seeing a beautiful landscape of trees around him. He could see how Stain was training a little red-haired boy of about 5 years old with the katana. Stain, when you see a hero, grab the katana and you slit his throat. Did you understand, boy? He received a strong blow to the head from a brunette, who was standing next to a certain rabbit. Shia, what kind of things do you say to my nephew? Stain, damn, I see you have the same character as your sister Hanabi. The red-haired boy threw himself into the rabbit's arms, saying, Aunt Mirko, Aunt Shia, I'm happy to see you. That red-haired boy had emerald eyes and a few freckles. Mirko, with a big smile, hugged the little one, saying, How have you been, my little Sora? Izuku felt arms hug him from behind, while a beautiful bicolor rested her chin on his right shoulder, saying, Good morning, darling. Izuku, good morning, love. I see that they are already as lively as ever. Shota, well, you already know how Sora is with Stain. They watched as Mirko and Shia greeted them from below. Sora, Mom, Dad, it's time for us to go see Aunt Izumi. Izuku gave a slight smile, saying, That's right, in a few seconds Mom and I will go down so we can all go together. Shota, love. Izuku, yes. Shota, I'm really happy by your side. You. Without realizing it, you changed my life. She gave him a kiss on the lips, while Mirko and Shia played with Sora outside the cabin where Hanabi once lived. Well, Izuku had decided to live in that cabin with the bicolor. Stain stayed next to them at Izuku's request. And now Stain was in charge of taking care of Sora. He, along with Izuku and little Sora, went to visit Hanabi's grave every day, placing several beautiful roses on it. Izuku and the others set off towards the city, Stain carrying Sora on his shoulders. Izuku was holding his wife's hand, while Mirko and Shia walked alongside them. A beautiful brunette watched them walk away, while standing outside the cabin with a beautiful smile. Sora turned around, seeing his grandmother. The little boy raised his hand and in a low voice would say, Goodbye, Grandma.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.